But, all right, let's get started. Welcome, welcome back to HPP, the podcast that talks with tomorrow's hoop stars. I am Rich Harris. Thank you for joining us again. Today, I'm joined by the Bay Area bomber, Drew Barton. Drew and I are both getting ready to go on road trips. What part of the country are you headed to, Drew?
I'm actually not going too far. I'm just going down to Central Valley, California, so about
Okay.
4 hours for me. I'm running the conference cross country meet is being hosted by Sonoma, and I, as somebody who has kind of an affinity for running the track and field and running sports, they asked if I could go, kind of just be a point man, and not in the business of saying no when it comes to building my resume. So
Right. But not only you're a point man, period. I mean, you're the point guard for this show. Were you a point guard when you played, or were you a shooting guard?
I was a shooting guard. I was actually the defensive specialist. I would like to consider myself the Tony Allen of my generation.
Okay. Hopefully you didn't steal money from the Players Association.
No, that I did not do. That I definitely did not do.
So yeah, and it's kind of funny. I'm probably going probably 150 miles fewer than you, but it would take me about the same time if I left in the morning. So the Big East Media Day is on Wednesday morning, and if I left from my house about 50 miles from Madison Square Garden with traffic, it would probably, no lie, probably take me 4 hours if I went in time to be there at 9 o'clock. So I am staying the night before. I am going to take a train in. It's going to drop me off right at the Garden, and I'll have a day away from my family. By the way, if you ever have children, I just want to warn you, they will ruin 50% of what you own. And then if you have cats with claws, they will ruin the other 50%. And if you have a dog, he will help you stay sane.
I have the dog. Well, my parents have a dog that I basically watch it throughout the days. When dad's running practice and I work from home, like this morning, I had the dog with me. It's been actually, the house is starting to kick it up into basketball gear. I actually just helped run Alumni Day for both our men's and women's teams on Saturday, which was actually a really good time. We had a really good turnout. The men's team, no Jalen Wells appearance, unfortunately. But we had some really good players. There's actually a pretty nice crop of guys who played at Sonoma. We had a couple of guys who are still playing internationally. So the game was actually a lot more competitive than I thought. We had our men's legends game, so that was like the 50 and up bracket.
Right.
Played. Our women's game was actually a pretty good time too. They had a couple of players show up that just a little bit late. So at first it was kind of like, oh, they've only got 6, but they actually got to a nice, pretty solid rotation. And then our men's game went on, and they had a great turnout. The men had, like I said, quite a few guys, and quite a few guys who are still actively playing, be it overseas or semi-pro or something like that.
No, and Jalen Wells figures to probably play. He's definitely going to get some minutes. And
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, Memphis is kind of, at least last time I looked, had been bothered by some injuries, I think, especially at the wing spots. So he might play sooner rather than later. But today we're going to talk about the Atlantic Coast Conference. And now 18 teams, thanks to realignment. Stanford and California join. And I'm going to stress this. The Atlantic Coast Conference is joined by Stanford and California from the Pac-12, while SMU joins from the American or the AAC. None of those three teams, by the way, Stanford and Cal were kind of bottom feeders in the Pac-12 last year. Those Stanford underachieved, I think. SMU was upper half of their conference, but they definitely didn't make the NCAA tournament. Coaching changes at Louisville. Pat Kelsey comes over from Charleston to replace Kenny Payne, who was fired. At SMU, Andy Enfield replaces Rob Lanier, who was fired. We've talked about Andy Enfield before, kind of curious. He left USC for SMU. We pretty much think he was fired, but no one's actually saying that officially. And at Stanford, Kyle Smith comes over from Washington State to replace Jared Haas, a firing that was long overdue at Stanford. And we could talk about that a little more when we get to Stanford. The regular season champ was North Carolina.
One thing I want to throw into coaching changes, Rick, is Tony stepping down at Virginia as well.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's the big one.
Yeah. Yeah, geez. I forgot about that. So Tony Bennett he's been replaced by his top assistant, and I don't remember the name. I'm not sure if the database has been updated. We have a coaching database. Let me see. They do have it. His name is Ron Sanchez.
Ron Sanchez.
He is being named the interim, but of course he's been with Tony for a while. He knows the system. So we will also probably discuss that a little as well when we get to Virginia, which I think that definitely deserves some discussion. So in terms of who made the tournament last year, as I said, North Carolina was a regular season champ, but they didn't win the conference tourney. NC State went on an unprecedented run last year, not just in the conference tournament to win it, but also to get all the way to the Final Four in the NCAA tournament. And they beat North Carolina to win the ACC championship, and then to get to the Final Four, they beat Duke. So NC State was an 11th seed. North Carolina was a 1 seed. Duke is a 4 seed, or was. These were all last year. Clemson was a 6, and Virginia was a 10. Very debatable whether Virginia should have got in. I really think that should have gone to either Pitt or maybe or St. John's in the Big East. That was my feelings last year. In terms of conference awards, R.J. Davis won Player of the Year, UNC point guard. Reese Beekman, Virginia point guard, won Defensive Player of the Year. Could have gone to his teammate as well, Ryan Dunn. And Rookie of the Year was Marcus Burton, the point guard, scoring guard for Notre Dame. All right, so I kind of have these listed, Drew, in the order that I think that they will finish. But as we discuss, I can move these teams around. We'll start off with Duke. And I will start off by saying they're bringing in 6 top 40 recruits. 6. 2 of them are top 10 recruits. Now, they lose pretty much the whole roster from last year, including Kyle Filipowski, Jared McCain, Jeremy Roach, who went to Baylor, by the way. But they do have a couple of returners and a couple of quality returners, and that's Tyrese Proctor, point guard, and Caleb Foster, a wing. Proctor was showing some improvement, but still hasn't lived up to his billing. A lot of people at one point were calling him a lottery pick. Caleb Foster came in as a very high recruit last year, didn't play so great. Also, in the portal, though, I think Duke is starting to learn you can't just win with freshmen, and they brought in some really quality players. And a lot of these guys are very good on the defensive end. Malik Brown from Syracuse was tremendous player for Syracuse last year, quietly. Sion James. Sion James from Tulane, a combo guard, big point guard, quality player. Mason Gillis, who was a defensive specialist for Purdue, or I don't know if I don't want to call him defensive specialist, but certainly more known for his defense, rebounding, kind of glue guy stuff than he was for his offense, but he can score inside and out. And Cameron Sheffield, too, was also a solid defender 2 years ago for Rice, and is a talented all-around player. He takes over, or he comes in from Rice after sitting out last year due to injury. So unlike many people on our staff, Drew and I are not Duke fans, but I'm going to give credit where credit's due. To me, they look like the team to beat, but again, they're going to be relying on a lot of freshmen, I think, at least for bench play, but probably 1 or 2 will start for this team. What are you thinking, Drew?
Yeah, I mean, again, credit where credit's due. I think they had a tremendous offseason, both on the recruiting trail and in the transfer portal. I really like the transfer class they brought in. I was actually just talking to my brother, who is in fact a big Duke guy. He actually, the way I'm looking Gonzaga folks, that's how he's with Duke. So he's not just a wave the flag. He's very aware of the guys they're bringing in. He loves the additions of the portal guys, probably more so than even the freshmen, just because he believes that there are guys who can instantly play a role. And Duke has very recently gone the way of the one and done. And, you know, we've seen it get them relatively far, but it always kind of peters out. And when you rely on freshmen, as we know, there's always that chance for that kind of flame out. But they bring in guys like a Sion James, a Mason Gillis, and Malik Brown, who, while they're not going to be the quote unquote dudes, you can trust that if I put Mason Gillis out there and he's got to play 20, 25 minutes, I'm going to get, like I said, he's going to do everything I need him to do. He shot, I think, 30. He shot well from three last year. No, he was above 30.
Yeah, he's improved over the years.
Yeah, he shot 32 years ago, about 36%. On about 3 attempts a game, he shot almost 47. So guys like that are really important for this team because I think so recently it's been running through the young guys. I'm not a Proctor guy. We've talked about it ad nauseum on the show. I think for this team to reach their ceiling, he does have to step up and kind of become a guy that they can count on to be a leader. And not necessarily just in terms of production, but in terms of clutch play, big moment play, because I feel like the big knock on him has been in the big games. I always feel like he kind of just disappears a little bit. And when you're on a team with a bunch of glue guys, a bunch of freshmen, somebody's got to be the alpha. The freshmen, I mean, how can you not love what they bring in? I mean, this is one of the more impressive recruiting classes of the last couple of years, probably. Cooper Flagg, I'm not going to spend a bunch of time talking about him. You know, the book is kind of out. He's got all the tangibles that you want. He's big, he's fluid, he's long, he can jump, he can run. You know, we saw him with his body be able to go toe to toe with the Team USA guys over the summer, right. And, you know, looked like he belonged just physically. Just watching some of those clips in that film, I didn't look there and go, oh, wow, he needs to put on 15 pounds. Oh, wow, he's not fast enough. Like, all those things will come, but he already looked the part of a future NBA player. I think pump the brakes a little bit on the offense. I think his half-court offense will still need to develop. His jump shot isn't super smooth to me. It definitely does go in enough, but I don't look at it and go, oh, wow, he's really polished in the half court. But the thing that I love about this kid is the intangibles. This kid is a competitor. This kid, he's made of all the right stuff. He carries himself. I mean, he's young. I think he's young for his grade. I think he should still technically be in high school, if I'm not mistaken.
I'll tell you his age while you're keep on going.
Yeah, I love the way that he carries himself. And for a young guy to show me a level of commitment on the defensive end, a level of competitiveness and fire is really important to me. You know, we live in an era where, you know, we question, I think, a lot of the times on guys of how much does basketball really matter to them? Is this more of just a means to an end, or is it really about a love for the game? And this kid's got a love for the game. So I love Cooper Flagg. I think he's going to be an absolute stud. Did you get the age?
He doesn't turn 18 till the first day of winter.
Yeah.
So December 21st.
Like, I think this kid's a stud. I think no matter what, he's going to work in college. Again, some people need to pump the brakes. I'm seeing people putting him as the conference player of the year. I'm seeing people put him as an first team All-American. Timeout. College basketball is a long season. It's a different game than high school. He's going to be going against really talented grown men across the country. But absolute beast. I love the kid. Kaman Maluchek, I believe is how you pronounce. He's the 7-foot center who had just played for the South Sudanese team. This is probably the most intriguing kid that they have. Yeah. Like a lot of kids that we see that come the international route, especially at their size, definitely pretty raw. But you just look at him and see the outline of a kid that has all the tools to make this work at a really high level. He's a
unicorn. It's 7-footer. Yep. You know, if I could just interject, you know, absolutely. The question is, does he go the route of KP or he might even be more athletic? I think he's more athletic than KP. Think he's more athletic, or does he go the route of Thon Maker? You know, which you know, because, you know, at Thon Maker at this age, you know, we were like, wow, I've never seen a guy that big, you know, move that way. But it never really translated.
Right.
So, but yeah, I mean, this guy who sometimes brings the ball up at 7 feet tall.
I was literally just going to say, I'm like, he is very much in line with that generation of, you know, he's not like Wembanyama-esque, where Wembanyama sometimes I think gets too enamored with playing on the perimeter. I think Maluchek knows he's a big, but like the jump shot actually looks pretty good. It's not the most consistent thing, but like it doesn't look janky. It looks like that there's something there. Moves super well. I think he's already up to about 250 pounds. So
that's another thing I was going to say. He's also not a string bean like a lot of these guys.
Yeah. He's got the body, and it's only going to get more toned, more developed as he gets older. He's going to be a freshman in college, and B, he's in a college weight program. So upside wise, you could make the argument that he might have the most upside out of, you know, this freshman class, and I would totally agree with you. Flagg's probably the safe pick. I think Maluchek has the potential to be very much so in that unicorn class. And then there are two other big freshmen who are their top 20 recruits. Isaiah Evans. Let's see, I got a bunch of notes on these guys because my brother wouldn't stop talking about him. He's an absolute bucket getter. He's definitely more polished on that side of the ball. There's a lot of work to be done in terms of developing as a holistically as a player. He is more in line with the traditional freshman. Like the skills are there, but you look at the body, you realize like, hey, he's got a lot of growing to do in terms of just like building out his body, learning how to play with more strength, more of a base. The talent's there, especially on the offensive side of the ball. I mean, the guy is 6'6", 6'7". But I don't love the frame. And sometimes when you watch him play, like looking at some of his clips from when he was younger, a lot of it was he's just bigger and more skilled than guys. It's not as much of physical domination. Like Cooper Flagg would physically dominate people, and you're like, there's nothing you can do. Sometimes I think Evans has the skill set. I've been seeing people calling him poor man's Brandon Ingram or the young Brandon Ingram. And I actually kind of think that's apt. Like the talent's there. He's just got to build the body. And then the one guy who I think is going to be kind of that next wave of, not that they're the same player, but like a Grayson Allen almost, who's going to be like really talented player who will probably make his way to the league, but is definitely going to be a multi-year college guy. It's Con Kneppel. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Super, like out of all these guys, high IQ, really solid floor, knows how to play the game really well. His awareness on the court really fits the bill. But like laterally, he's not the same athlete that these other guys are. Vertically, he's not the same athlete. He's a guy that you're like, you might have to try to hide him on defense at sometimes in certain matchups. I think out of these top 4 freshmen, I think he's going to be the guy that falls out. That's not going to be in the rotation this year, personally.
Does he give you a little Dalton Connect vibes?
I could see that. I could. I don't.
Now, of course, Connect is a really good athlete, but
that's what I'm saying.
It didn't always show. It didn't always show.
Yeah, I don't think he has the athletic upside. Like Dalton, once he got on the national stage, you saw like, oh wow, okay, like there's a lot more pop in his legs and like playing at and above the rim. I don't think Con's ever gonna really get there. You never know. I mean, again, these guys are all going to grow probably potentially another inch or two. They're all going to put on probably another 10, 12 pounds the next year of muscle. But he strikes me as a guy that's going to probably follow the rotation first. Will stick around, hopefully, or will be in college basketball. You never know in today's landscape. If he doesn't play this year, he might look elsewhere. Who knows? But you like all the intangibles again of like the mental aspect of the game. He has the skill. I was looking up some of his stats. He doesn't really turn the ball over. He played at the EYBL tournaments and averaged close to 4 assists a game. Gets active on the boards, pulled about 5.5 boards a game at the EYBL stuff. Shoots the ball pretty efficiently. He's a great free throw shooter. His jump shot is the purest out of these guys. He walks to the line and he knocks them down. I think when I looked, it was like 82, 83%. So everything's there for him to probably be ready to play college basketball and play at high level. I think he's just going to get buried on this depth chart. And physically, when you're talking about the long term, that's where I start to wonder and go, are you more in line with being a 4-year college star? Probably less one and done than some of these other guys. If I had to rank it, I think Flagg's one and done. I think Malachek's probably one and done. We'll see how that goes, but I think the tantalizing tools are just there. I think Evans, I could see being maybe like a 2-year guy, just because he won't get the burn this year with all those wings that they brought in. And then Kneppel is probably, I could see him being a 3 or 4-year guy at Duke. And by his 4th year, we're talking about the next like Luke Kennard, Grayson Allen kind of, 4-year Dookie who you just like, can this guy just graduate and get out of here already?
The funny thing is, if you just look at the returners and the recruiting class, this team would be competitive, but it certainly wouldn't be like a Final Four team. So they're going to need 1 or 2 of these freshmen in order to be, like a top 10 team in contention for the national championship. I really think they're going to need 1, probably 2 of these freshmen to really be all conference types, that ability, and if you look at the returners and the transfers, none of these guys are really big time scorers. Proctor's best attribute is passing. James is probably an all around game, but again, he's probably he's kind of balanced, but he's certainly not like a bucket. Brown is rebounding defense. Gillis is more rebounding defense. Sheffield, again, an all-around game, not really known to being a scorer. Foster, has the capability to be a really good shooter, at the wing. But he didn't prove it last year. So that's why I'm thinking two of these guys really need to step up, and one of them really needs to probably be like a 15-point night, 15 points per game type of guy. You know, is that, by the way, I don't know if it's, I think it's Malach. I think it's Malach.
Malach. Okay, yeah, I'm pronouncing that wrong. Yeah,
we had it right when we were talking about the World Cup.
Yeah, I could totally be wrong.
At the Olympics, because by the way, he was on the South Sudan was in the Olympics, right?
Yeah, no, I think
he was on the Olympic team. Yeah,
he had like 7 points and 3 rebounds. Like he actually,
yeah,
on the court, impacting the game, made some plays. I really like him. I'm very skeptical of these 7-footers that come in and everyone's, oh my God, they're the next, Wembanyama, they're the next Porzingis. I actually think that, like, from what I've seen, he's not the string being. I think he's aware that he's a big with some guard skills, not like he doesn't have that switch. I like him a lot. I think he's good. The more I watch him, the more I'm like, I think this he's got a chance.
Yeah, I was blown away. And and I first saw him when I was scouting the draft pick. I forget his name now, but by the Raptors, pre-draft stuff.
Not Loco.
No, not Coloco. I'd have to look on the Raptors depth chart. But anyway, he was a big on the South Sudan. He too was very young. I was actually surprised he was in the draft. But I was just checking him out with the national team, and it was Kaman. I think that's how you say his name. I think it's Kaman. He's the one. I was like, oh my God, this guy is so good. And I couldn't stop watching him, and just think about that. The guy totally blew away the guy the Raptors just drafted. So yeah, that tells you something right there. All right, so we'll move on to the Tar Heels. They lost 3 key players, 2 all-conference types, and Harrison Ingram and Amon Baycott finally left, and Cormac Ryan also. Zayden High, who was a pretty high recruit last year, left the team. Not sure what's going on there. They say he may be back next year. Some rumors are that he got in trouble off the court. We shall see, but he's not going to be playing for North Carolina this year. And my guess is good chance he's probably not coming back to North Carolina. He'll end up transferring somewhere else. But they do bring back Player of the Year R.J. Davis, Elliot Cadeau at point guard. Jalen Washington will take over for Baycott at center. Seth Trimble is still there and improved last year. Definitely made a lot of strides. Jalen Withers, who missed the most famous jump shot in the history of North Carolina, it returns. And they also brought in some really nice recruits. Cade Tyson from Belmont, sharpshooter, big wing. North Carolina people are going to like him, and he's a good replacement for Cormac Ryan, probably a better all-around player for sure. Vin Allen Lubin, who played Notre Dame and Vanderbilt, comes in. Athletic power forward who's developing a jump shot. I believe he will eventually displace Withers in the starting lineup. Mm-hmm. Also, Ty Claude, who's kind of a power forward center type, rebounds, block shots, stuff like that. They also bring in 3 top 100 recruits, including 2 top 12. Ian Jackson came in the composite rankings at number 8, shooting guard. Drake Powell, number 11, is a wing, and James Brown is a center. He came in at number 89. So I think you could definitely make an argument if you look at the returners and just the transfers. North Carolina has it over Duke, but then when you throw in the freshman class, Duke's freshman class is twice as big. Their players are more touted, but I certainly don't see where North Carolina I'm not going to be shocked, because they have the better veteran players, that they would win this conference. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the big thing that separates is like one of my core tenets of success in March, but success in all of college basketball, regular season through March Madness, is guard play. And I think when you have a three-headed beast of RJ Davis, who should be the favorite to go back-to-back for player of the year, just given that he's going to even take on probably more of a load scoring with Ingram and Baycott and those guys gone. I like Cadeau. I know that like his box score doesn't jump out, but I think he plays so hard. Like I just love what he brings to the table, and if he can even just sharpen up the offensive game a little bit, which I think will happen, you give him another year of growth. I think he's totally in a position where he's if he's whether he's spelling Davis, I don't think you play them. You probably could play them together.
Well, they played them together most of last year.
Yeah, I'm like, yeah. Oh, that's true. That's true. Cadeau did, yeah. I like their back.
Davis really played the two for.
Yeah, that's true. And then I really like the Cade Tyson pickup. I think he's kind of again like over the last couple of years they've had that like they've needed to fill that shooter floor spacer role. You had Brady Manick. They brought in Pete Nance. I mean, these guys are varying size, a little bit changed, but again, like a guy who can space the floor, gives you some size. I mean, he's 6'7", shot the ball super well last year and shot the ball really well as a freshman. And then the two freshmen they're bringing in, I think Ian Jackson, not super familiar with. He's kind of just a really solid kind of overall player. At the shooting guard spot, everything that I've been seeing, I didn't find a lot of film on him, but just in terms of like reading up kind of on him, everyone just is like offensively pretty solid. Defensively, he competes, he's on the ball. He's kind of just a well-rounded player already. He's got the size and everything. I was reading someone comparing him to like a Lonnie Walker type, and I know like everyone wants these guys to be compared to like the next LeBron, the next KD, the next Steph. But I think like that's actually a pretty fair comparison based on everything that I'm seeing. It's like, hey, really just well-rounded player that at that guard spot is probably not cracking that starting rotation, but I totally see him coming off the bench as he gets more familiar and playing a role. I like Drake Powell because Drake Powell's a defensive guy. Like that's what he's known for. He's 6'5", like 190. And again, just like watching him and reading up on him, he's like fine enough on offense, not super polished. But man, on the defensive floor, this kid gets after it. He's super athletic. He knows how to use his frame. He's all over the place. He's really good on and off the ball from what I've seen, which I think that's where freshmen get really caught up is like they can be pretty engaged on the ball just because, hey, it's me versus you, mano a mano. Right. But seeing a kid kind of like really understand how to play defense in like a team setting is going to be huge. When to help, when to rotate, when to double, when to double down and dig out in the post, like stuff like that. If he can pick that up quick at his size and his athleticism is going to be super helpful. Because I'm a big believer that if you're going to play that off guard kind of wing position, especially along like a Cadeau or a Davis, you either A, have to be a knockdown shooter who can bend defenses without the ball through your movement, or you have to be a really off-ball threat because Powell's not going to dazzle you in the half court, break you down, but he's going to cut hard, he's going to crash the glass, he's going to get out in transition. So he doesn't need the ball in that sense, and he's going to do the dirty work on the defensive end. So I really like Drake Powell actually a lot. I think he fits more of a need than Ian Jackson does just because they have Davis back. Like they're going to get their offense from Davis. Hopefully Cadeau takes a step.
And Tyson's going to be key.
Exactly. Tyson's going to be back. But like Powell's the type of guy that I think he'll give them something more because like Cadeau competes on defense, but like Powell's legitimately got that 6'5" size to be able to switch 1 through 3 easily. And, I think he's going to find his way onto the court just off of his effort. I think the other two transfers they bring in, Alan Lubin and Claude are, I think, kind of just pieces. I think they're solid.
I think Ben Allen Lubin has a chance to start ahead of Wither.
I can see that. Yeah.
I do think he's a 4-year guy, but I think he's going to be, maybe next year might be, in the running to be an all-conference player.
For sure.
He's a good all-around player who, as I said, is developing a jump shot. He started to take some threes last year at Vandy. So very athletic and plays bigger than his size. So he really could play the 5 if you wanted him to.
If they're going to take down Duke, especially with their best player being a small guard in RJ Davis, they're going to need to surround him with the athleticism and size to compete because Duke is going to be huge. They brought in a bunch of 6'5", 6'6" wings that can all defend. They bring in freshmen that are 6'9", 7'1". They're going to need the size, and I think that they've done that pretty well.
Because the starting combo of Davis and Cadeau are definitely offensive players and smart.
100%. Yeah.
And Trimble is a good defender. Right. Jackson, the freshman, good athlete. Powell, good defender. So, I think these freshmen will have a role.
For sure.
And Jalen Washington obviously has got to step up, and he was highly touted coming in. Has been behind Baycott. He's been efficient when he's played. So,
Yeah,
but
for sure.
huge shoes to fill there for Baycott. But we shall see. He's also a key. But I think Cade Tyson, he, beside RJ Davis, this team doesn't have a lot of shooting. So I figured Cade Tyson is going to have a green light on this team. Yeah.
I mean, like I said, they've done this now for the last like 4 years where they've brought in a proven shooter, and it's Brady Manick. It worked super, super well. Pete Nance, not as great. And then, Cormac Ryan, last pretty good. They petered out, but that role, that like wing 3, maybe 4 shooter has been big for them. And when it works, they go far. When it doesn't, they've struggled.
Right. Okay, so now this is when the conference gets tricky.
Yeah.
And you could put a number of teams. You could group a number of teams. I think the next team we're going to talk about is probably the best of the rest, but and that's Wake Forest. Now, Wake Forest loses 2 players that weren't household names, but they were ultra productive for them. And that's power forward Andrew Carr, also played some at center. Could shoot the ball, came from Delaware. I can remember I was looking at another prospect when Carr was a freshman. And again, it's kind of like the Kamen situation at Duke. I went to look at one guy and I ended up watching Carr, and I put him on my draft board, and sure enough, he transferred to Wake Forest the next season, was there for a couple seasons. Now he's going to Kentucky. Kevin Miller was a point guard for Wake last year. He's going to SMU. Also, Damari Monsanto, who didn't play a lot last year because he was recovering from, I believe, an Achilles injury. He came back kind of mid-season and was so-so, but so if you want to look at what Wake did last year, Monsanto didn't contribute a lot, but he could have been a huge contributor on this team because he's one of the best outside shooters in the country, has good size too. Who do they have coming back? They have coming back some quality players. Great backcourt in Hunter Salas, who will probably take over at the point for the majority this year, and Cam Hildreth, who also can play make some. Cam was bothered by all kinds of injuries, specifically a wrist injury on his shooting hand last year. His numbers all dipped. And I hear that wrist still might not be 100%. Wake just recently played Alabama in a scrimmage. They got thumped. But Alabama's supposed to be a top 5 team. So I don't know. It's also preseason. Efton Reed really had his best year of his career last year at center for them. He returns. Parker Friedrichsen, who I believe is a sophomore. Or redshirt sophomore. He's a great shooter who probably will get more playing time this year now, especially with Monsanto going. And the recruiting class was really nice. Omar Billow, a 5-star who hardly played at Iowa State last year, is probably going to be starting for this team. And I would expect to be like a 12-8 guy, maybe even better. They also bring in Tyler Johnson, a point guard who's an efficient playmaker, also a really good on-ball defender. He comes over from Louisville. Tavion Spillers, a player we interviewed at the end of last year, was one of the great players on that Appalachian State team that was really in the running for an NCAA bid. Obviously, they lost out to, it was James Madison, I guess. Or did somebody else actually win that conference? I forget. But anyway, the Appalachian State, I think, lost like 5 games last year, including they beat James Madison. So I believe they also, that doesn't matter. I'm not going to. Devin Cosby, who was a freshman last year at Alabama, didn't play a lot, but he's a really good shooter. Churchill Abyss, a center at DePaul, He was a freshman last year, had a solid freshman season. And they also bring in Juke Harris, a top 100 4-star guy at shooting guard. So what do you make of this Wake Forest team? I know we've kind of had a soft spot for them over the last couple of years, and they keep on coming up just short of the tournament for us.
I think this has to be the year. I mean, we've been saying that. I think this has to be the year. I think Hunter Salas is a very viable candidate to be player of the year.
Agreed.
In this conference. Not just because of voter fatigue. RJ went last. I legitimately think he might come out as the best player in the conference this year.
Yep.
I think Cam Hildreth, I think, is a really nice kind of running mate with him, whereas Salas gives you the explosiveness, the athleticism, the defense. Cam gives you that floor spacing. Both of them have developed as playmakers really well. I mean, Hunter was at Gonzaga, and when he was there, he was kind of just an on-ball defensive weapon, maybe score in transition. He's really emerged on both sides of the ball, playing within his hands. Same thing with Efton Reed. I remember when they picked him up, I understood why they went and got Hunter Salas. I had called for him to get more minutes than Hickman at the time. So that didn't surprise me. If anything, it hurt me. Efton Reed, I was surprised to see him really kind of pop. He could never crack that rotation because, Gonzaga had so many bigs and forwards, but he has all the physical traits to be an impactful big, and they're going to need him because this team, at least we're coming back, is pretty guard heavy in terms of returners. He's kind of the big returning member with size. So I really like this team. I think the big thing for them is I think they're just deeper. I think they've got a guy that can play behind every one of their projected starters, which I think is going to be big for them. And they have that alpha kind of killer guy who on any given night can go give you 20. So I really like this Wake Forest team. There's not a lot of household names besides Hunter Salas on it, but there's a lot of guys that can all play. And this is definitely a team that I think on any given night could trot out 9, 10 guys, depending on what the game calls for. They've got decent size. They're bringing in, Churchill's 6'10", I think. I think Omaha Billieu is 6'8". So they're going to have some size.
Spillers is 6'7", 6'8", and he can play bigger than that.
Exactly. I'm I think they're going to have the ability to match up with people. I like this team. I don't think they're going to blow you away. You look at the two teams above them, North Carolina and Duke, they got the star power, they got the big recruiting classes. But this Wake Forest team, I think you can argue this Wake Forest team to me is probably going to be deeper than say North Carolina is, depending on how the freshmen pop, off the rip at least. So we'll see. I think they're going to be really solid, and I can totally see them. Do I think they're in the same category as North Carolina and Duke? No, because of the talent. I do think there's a bit of a talent disparity, but I do think they're going to be right in the mix, and this is the year they get back to the tournament.
Right. I'll tell you what, if you haven't seen Cam Hildreth play, there is nobody who has more fire. And, he's just one of those fiery, absolutely. Cam Spencer guys, both named Cam. But, he's got that Cam Spencer fire, competitiveness. He could be a football player if he wasn't a basketball player. I hope he's healthy this year because he's a joy to watch. Yeah. All right, so now we're going to move on to another team that's we've had a soft spot over the year, and that's Miami of Florida. Man, they are losing a bunch of guys. Some guys were key players for them last year, and some were others that were pretty high recruits that were just kind of wasting away on the bench. Yeah. You can't, in this day and age, and I'm just saying that, if you bring in, high recruits, if you're not going to play them, don't expect them to stay. It's just not happening. So that's what happened to Miami this year. But the big guys they lost were, of course, Norchad Omier went to Baylor. Wooga Poplar went to Villanova. Bensley Joseph went to Providence. And Keyshawn George was drafted in the NBA draft. Who returns is Matthew Cleveland, wing, small forward. He's never quite lived up to his, 4 or 5 star billing, but he's a very good college player still. He has a chance to be drafted. He needs to take that next step, I think, especially offensively. But yeah. And then, of course, we know Nigel Pack has been at Miami now for a while. Point guard who also can light it up, can put up 20, 30 any night, shoots from anywhere on the court. Got a little Max Asmus in him. And they did well in the transfer portal. They bring in Lydon Kidd, a center from Virginia Tech, who also played at Clemson. He is a nice player, very productive. Not going to light up the scoreboard, but he's going to do what you need out of a center. Brandon Johnson is a forward who can score inside and out. He's a good defender. He's a good rebounder. Great all-around player. I think he's definitely a player to watch. Could even be all-conference in the ACC. We shall see. Jalen Blackman, leading scorer for Stetson last year. I don't remember what Blackman put up per game. I looked that up right now. I think it's like 15, 16 a game. No, 21.3 points per game last year for Stetson, who made the NCAA tournament. And he took over 8 threes a game and shot 38%, also 91% from the free throw line. So he figures to be a key player for Miami. And AJ Staten McCray from Samford, good wing player, solid wing player. And then Kieran Hui from Idaho State is another shot blocker rebounder type, also young. I believe he's only a sophomore. And then in the terms of freshmen, they bring in 2 top 50 guys in Jaleel Bethea, combo guard, comes in at number 7 in the composite rankings, and Austin Schwartz, a shooting guard, comes in at number 50. Those two also figure to play a fair amount. So this team seems a little guard wing heavy. They don't have a lot of proven bigs. So there is no replacement for Norchad Omier. Probably the closest player on this roster would be Brandon Johnson. Yeah. But otherwise this team looks like it's going to be pretty competitive, but they're going to be relying on at least one of the 2 high recruit freshmen. And I think they're going to need big production from the 3 transfers, Blackman, Johnson, and Kidd.
Yeah, I think this team, you said it, I had a big soft spot for Miami. I loved the guards that have just come through there. Pack, Wong, Poplar, George, like they've just been kind of guard university, or it feels like for the last couple of years, and that's kind of where they're going again. I mean, Cleveland's more of a small forward wing, but like Pack's going to be their best player. He's going to be at the point. But Thea's a combo guard, kind of an offensive-minded guy. He strikes me as very much so. He's like the standard freshman guard. Needs to get bigger, needs to get stronger. I don't know how well he's going to do with like ACC contact at the rim, ACC ball pressure. He's not really a playmaker. He's kind of a bucket getter, and that's going to serve him well at times. At other times, it's going to probably get him into trouble. It's the same issue I think we've had them over the last couple of years. Is like in the past couple of seasons, we've been saying, what happens if Norchad Omier goes down? Like if he gets hurt, what happens? Because they have no size, and I think it's the same thing. Now they have Kidd and Johnson, who I think can both, by committee, kind of replace the production there. And I think they're proven guys. They've been playing Division I basketball. They've put up numbers. Kidd comes from Virginia Tech, which is another Power 5 team. And so I like both of them. But again, it's like if something happens to one of those 2 guys, looking at this roster, everyone else that you're going to be counting on is going to be a 6'2" to 6'5" kind of guard wing. Like where's the size going to come from? So I think talent-wise, they have it. You're bringing in 3 guys who all average north of 14 points a game, I believe, and have done it and have proven that they can do it. You bring back 2 guys that are, super talented. Pack is, again, we've talked about Davis. We talked about like the point guard play, or the lead guard play, I guess I'll say, in this conference is going to be very, very good. You're going to have Salas. You're going to have Pack. You're going to have Davis. Hopefully Proctor kind of elevates. But I just kind of am worried, like they're an injury to Brandon Johnson or Lynn Kidd away from me being like, well, they're really small and they don't have anybody else that I trust to man the middle in a league that's going to have some really solid bigs. It just sucks because you look at what they lost, and the 3 guys that they lost that are most important, Omier, Poplar, and George, in theory, all could have came back. So you're like, man, imagine if those 3 guys came back and they brought in this transfer class and they bring in Bethea and Schwartz. This team would be really loaded. But I think they'll be competitive. I could see them, if the bigs stay healthy and produce the way that they produced prior to, I could see this team giving Wake Forest a solid run for that number 2 spot and maybe even supplanting them there potentially. But yeah, I think we have them at 4 right now. I think that's a pretty good spot for them. I still like the team. I think if they stay healthy, they can get anybody on any given night. But I just think they're a little bit more, all the teams we've mentioned before, I think they're just a little bit more fragile in terms of they're not as deep, especially at their kind of forward and center position.
Yep. Agreed. Next team we're going to talk about is NC State Wolfpack, and they are deep. Despite losing some key players. In fact, they lost 4 starters from that Final Four team, or at least 3 of them were starters. I don't know if Mohammed Diarra started or not, but he definitely played a key role for that team at playing backup center and also power forward. And so they lose DJ Burns, the big guy in the middle. DJ Horn, the shooting guard, went to the pros. He was their leading scorer. Diarra, like I said, he contributed rebounds, blocked shots, and could shoot. And Casey Morcell also graduated, shooting guard, good defender, decent shooter. So all 4 of those guys are gone. But this team is still really deep, thanks to a lot of key returners who got playing time last year because of injuries, or maybe they didn't play because of injuries or what have you. But starting off with Jaden Taylor, who had a really nice year last year. And I think he's on the verge of, he's a shooting guard on the verge of breaking into like an all-conference type. Michael O'Connell, who really came into his own, point guard from Stanford. He's back. Ben Middlebrooks, backup center, backed up DJ Burns, really good defender, just a gritty player, came from Clemson. Dennis Parker was a high recruit last year. Didn't see a ton of playing time, but he's got the pedigree. And MJ Rice, former 5-star from Kansas, he didn't play much last year. Actually, ended up shutting it down and redshirting. MJ is a wing shooting guard, and he has a lot of potential. It's just a matter of him getting it together. And then they hit the portal and they brought in 4 quality guys who figured none of these guys are really stars, but they're all solid players. Brandon Huntley Hatfield started Tennessee, then went to Louisville. He's a big who can, block some shots, rebound, and shoot some. Really good from the mid-range. When he was younger, he reminded me, I thought he had Bob McAdoo written all over him because he used to knock down those shots from the elbows. But he's still a very good player. I think he has all-conference potential. Then you have Dontrez Style, former North Carolina guy, went to Georgetown. He's a small forward. Do a little bit of everything. Solid player. Mike James comes over, played big minutes last year at the wing for Louisville. And Marcus Hill, a shooting guard, comes over from Bowling Green. He averaged over 20 points per game last year in the MAC. In terms of recruiting, they brought in 3 top 140 guys. 2 are 4-stars, and that's Paul McNeil, a wing, and also Bryce Hurd, a shooting guard, came in at 109 in the composite. And McNeil came in at 56. So as you can see, North Carolina has a lot of options, no stars, but a lot of solid players here.
Yeah, I don't really know how I feel about this team because they don't have like that go-to option. Like the 4 teams we've mentioned before, I think there's all one guy on those teams. Each one of those teams has a guy that we're like, yeah, I could see them being like conference player of the year. And maybe even 1 or 2 guys that like I could see them getting on an all-conference team or an honorable mention team. I don't know if I feel that same way about NC State. Part of it is maybe I'm just not as familiar with some of these guys because last year's team was dominated so much so by that 3 of Burns, Horn, and Diarra. Like there was the big, not only were they the big time players, but the big personalities that kind of soaked up the spotlight. So I think that they're kind of one of those teams that I could see totally fluctuate. I could totally see them falling down this leaderboard, not like completely collapse, but I could see a team like Clemson being better than them. I could see a team like Pittsburgh being better than them. I could see a team like Syracuse being better than them. So, I mean, granted, we're in the middle of the pack now, so sure, there's not gonna be a lot of separation. I don't know. I think it's one of those ones where somebody has to emerge from this group as like the leader, the quote unquote star. I'm not saying they got to go average 20 a game, but somebody's got to come through and be that like all conference kind of lock that, can carry this team night in and night out because the ACC is kind of reloaded and there's a lot of really good talented teams in here. And I think being deep can get you somewhat far, but at the end of the day, when the shot clock's winding down, you need that guy who can go into Duke or into UNC and go get you 25 and help you bring home a win. And I don't see that on this roster right now.
Right. I think, the best, Huntley Hatfield is going to probably give you 10 to 15 a night.
Right.
Jaden Taylor might be that go-to guy. MJ Rice might turn out to be that guy.
Sure. Yeah, a lot of talent. I just don't know if there's who it's going to be. I just got to see who it's going to be. It's going to be somebody. I think there's enough. Somebody's got to score points. Somebody's got to grab rebounds. But it'll just be interesting to see who does it. And maybe they just do it. Maybe they do it by committee. Maybe this is a team that has 3 guys that all average 12 to 15, and on any given night, anybody hurts you. We'll see. I like my teams, especially when you're trying to be like top of the conference in a conference like this. I like my teams to have that kind of stud that you can just fall back on any given night.
And they're definitely going to play different than they did last year because nobody on this team can replace Burns. Huntley Hatfield is more of a point or more of a power forward.
Yeah.
Middlebrooks is a center, but he's not a scorer.
Yeah.
So they're definitely not going to be able to dump it in and work their offense that way. So they're definitely, this is going to be a learning curve. But I think talent-wise, these guys will definitely be in the upper half of the ACC.
Sure.
Are they good enough to make the tournament? Don't know.
Yeah.
All right. So Louisville, we move on to Louisville. And if you want to know who Louisville lost this year from last year, just look at last year's roster, and that's the list of the players they lost. They lost.
Everybody's gone.
Everyone's gone. And I will say, I don't think that anyone did better job in the portal than Louisville. Sure. I mean, they went and picked off a bunch of quality players, sometimes the best player from Team X or Team Y. And we'll go through that list. And, of course, there's a lot of Charleston guys over here because Pat Kelsey came from Charleston. Yep. But leading off our list is Chucky Hepburn, the point guard from Wisconsin. Keyshawn Pryor, big unicorn-like guy from South Florida who led that surprising team last year. Power forward, can shoot some, block shots, rebound, also put the ball on the floor some. Corin Johnson, a combo guard from Washington, was really quietly a good player for Washington last year. Same goes for Javon Hadley, small forward coming over from Colorado. Really, both of these guys are coming from the Pac-12, very efficient at what they do. Hadley's a nice, defender. Corin Johnson could be a good scorer and playmaker. We got Noah Waterman, a 6'10", 6'11" guy who can shoot, coming over from BYU. Terrence Edwards was the star on that James Madison team last year. All-conference player, may have been player of the year in the Sun Belt. I think he was. He comes over at shooting guard. Akabar Traore, small forward, comes over from Long Beach State. This guy's only about 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" at best, and man, does he stuff the stat sheet. Rebounds, block shots, steals. Not a great shooter, not a great scorer, but he does everything else at a high level. Rain Smith comes over from Charleston. Excellent shooter. I mean, this guy is a knockdown shooter. Also can play some at the point. James Scott comes over from Charleston, a center, a 7-footer, block shots. And a couple other guys I'm going to mention who won't play this year, apparently. And that's Ali Khalifa, if you remember from BYU, excellent center for one of the best passing centers in college basketball. He apparently is injured and plans to redshirt. Now, red shirts are not written in stone. So if somehow it comes out that, maybe he gets healthier quicker than expected and this team is doing well and they need him, maybe he comes out this year. Another very good player from Charleston who injured his leg actually in the NCAA tournament last year. That's Kobe Rogers. He too is redshirting right now with a knee injury. Louisville, to add to this whole huge group, also brings in Connie Roos, a forward who's a top 40 guy in the freshman rankings at number 34. Probably won't see a ton of playing time because this team has a ton of really quality veterans. What do you think, Drew?
They absolutely crushed it. And I mean, hats off to them. I mean, like growing up, Louisville was like a powerhouse, for me. I mean, I saw they won when Pitino was there.
Growing up for me, they were
like
a top 10 team every year.
It was really weird and very hard to see them be so, I mean, they might have been the worst Division I team. Well, okay, that's maybe like on terms of like the Power Five.
Yeah.
I watched.
I mean, going on like for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, I was gonna say in the country, but then I remembered I am subject myself to watching Pacific at least once or twice a year, so they were definitely nowhere near that.
And Portland
and San Diego. Anyway, they absolutely crushed it. I mean, I'm not the biggest Chucky Hepburn fan, but when you need to bring a guy in, you could do a lot worse than handing the reins over to him. It's Kaysen Pryor, funny enough, the old Menlo assistant who I was close with actually had done some developmental work and worked out with Kaysen Pryor, spoke very highly of him. So it's great to see him kind of go the route of doing kind of, because he started at Boise, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So he did the kind of the mid-major route. Now he's on the big stage. I really like Terrence Edwards Jr. I mean, it's crazy to me that like as we're listing these guys, and I know you're just putting in that, but like that Terrence Edwards Jr. is like at number 6, and that like we have Ali Khalifa at the bottom, but as a potential redshirt, I'm like he could probably go in there and potentially start for his team.
Yeah, like, he can start for a lot of teams in the country.
Exactly. Like I really like what they've done. They're gonna have to obviously figure out how to play together, but I think that's the advantage of bringing in a lot of these Charleston guys is that they are going to have a baseline of how their coach is going to want them to play, how they're going to play, and then the new guys will be able to integrate to that probably quicker, seeing a chunk of the team already know what the expectation is, what the system's like. I think that does help because when you have a new coach and new players and you just kind of throw them together, that can be tough to figure out, especially when it's everybody's new. But yeah, everyone's new, but you've got 3 Charleston guys that are coming in that you can automatically kind of, hey, help me get these guys going. Talent-wise, I think they're going to be in contention for a bid, no doubt. Yeah. No doubt. It's just a matter of how quickly does it come together. But I think in terms of just if you were to go talent, I mean, again, Terrence Edwards Jr. is another one of those guards that you're like, this guy might come in here and give people a run for their money for an all-conference spot coming out of James Madison. So nothing to really add other than what's been said. I think they're super loaded. I think they're deep. I mean, hats off to them for going into the portal and coming out with a lot of absolute studs and hopefully getting Louisville back to their winning ways sooner rather than later because it really sucks seeing them win like 6 games a year.
This team has more talent than NC State.
Without a doubt.
It's just a question of can they pull it together under a new coach? I mean, yeah, we have some guys coming in from Charleston, but I figure most of those guys don't start because there's just much talent to start. But sure. I mean, the talent's there. Pryor is going to be a good scorer. Corin Johnson's going to be a good scorer. Waterman is going to. I mean, he's not going to be at 20 points a night, but man, at 6'10" or 6'11", he can shoot. Edwards, we know, is already a guy who can give you 20 a night. At James Madison. Now, James Madison isn't the ACC, but it's also not. It's not the dregs either. The Sun Belt is a good conference.
He did go toe-to-toe with Duke in the first round last year, and I thought if I remember correctly, I think he played okay. I would have to double check that, but
right. Yep. So this is a deep team with size, and they also have some guys who can distribute. I mean, Edwards himself is not a bad playmaker. So he could even run the offense. So you have just right there, you got Hepburn, Corin Johnson, Edwards, and Rain Smith. You got 4 potential point guards. And a lot of teams have no more than one. You got Pryor, Waterman, and Scott, and one guy I didn't mention, Frank eBay from Georgia. Also, all those guys can play center. So, you have a lot of players in between. So, if this team comes together, I could see them finishing as high as 3rd in the ACC.
Absolutely. I really like the collection of talent. I hope it works because there's a lot of guys on this team I just like. I like Cation Pryor. I like Terrence Edwards. I mean, again, I don't know if he plays, but I like Ali Khalifa. Like, I like a lot of the guys on this team. So hopefully it works for him.
Yeah. Well. All right. Next up is Clemson. Who had a really good year last year, but they do lose arguably their best player in PJ Hall to the pros. Also, Joe Girardi, who was a great shooter for this team, went on to the pros. Jack Clark was a valuable reserve, goes to VCU. RJ Godfrey, another big guy, gave some quality minutes to the team. He goes to Georgia. They do have a lot of players though that was on that team last year that made the Sweet 16, including Ian Shefflin. He looks anything but a basketball player, but this guy can play basketball, man. Don't leave him open because he'll knock down the three. He rebounds like crazy. He defends like crazy. He'll play, he's like 6'8", and he'll go up against 7-footers and he'll just beat them up. Guys like Filipowski and guys like that didn't want to face Shefflin. I love Ian Shefflin. Been trying to get him on the show forever because, But anyway, Chase Hunter, who was a solid point guard last year for the team, is back. Chauncey Wiggins, who's a 6'11" forward with some ball skills. He didn't play a ton last year, but he has a lot of upside. Jake Heidenbreeder didn't play last year due to injury. He is a sharpshooter from Air Force. Will definitely help replace Girardi. And Dylan Hunter, Chase Hunter's brother, is also back on the team. And then they hit the portal and brought in some solid guys. Jaden Zachary, a combo guard from Boston College. He's kind of like the smaller version of Ian Shefflin. He's another scrapper. Clemson likes their scrappers. And so he joins the team, good playmaker. Victor Lankinen, big center from Russia, played for Cincinnati the last few years. He kind of lost some playing time to the other big man they brought in. I'm drawing a blank right now, but Lankinen decided to come to Clemson. He will be a valuable replacement for PJ Hall. Can't shoot like PJ Hall, at least not yet, but he'll definitely pick it up on the boards and in the paint in terms of inside scoring, some shot blocking. They also bring Miles Foster from Illinois State, a power forward, which will also help offset the losses of the bigs. Last year, he averaged about 12 points per game for Illinois State, also 8 boards per game. So we shall see if that translates from the Illinois State is the Missouri Valley. Yeah, Missouri Valley.
Missouri Valley, yeah.
So usually those guys play at a pretty high level. So, and then lastly, they have Christian Reeves, a high recruit from Duke who never really saw the court. Partially because of injuries, and I think he still might be recovering from the injury that he suffered last year. So, but down the road, Reeves too could help offset losses, the bigs that this team lost. Recruiting, they did pretty well. They got 3 top 50 guys. The only one in the top 100 is another big power forward, Dallas Thomas, coming in the composite rankings at number 79. So, again, this maybe nothing. This kind of has the NC State vibe to it. A lot of options, a lot of bodies, but we don't know who the go-to guy is. It's more like a lot of workman-like players. But I don't know. Clemson seems to like that style, though. They're really going to miss the go-to guy in PJ Hall, I think.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really replace a PJ Hall. Like, he was one of the best bigs in the country. Played inside, played outside, had an awesome tournament run. It was great to see him kind of get put on the spotlight. I know, like, bigs, everyone, especially last year, was the Zach Edey show, but it was great to see Hall get some attention and love because they went on a good run.
Let me just say, wait. I got to stop you there. When he was on this show, that's when he really hit the national stage. I mean, that's when he became a household name. But
that's when he began. Yeah. I actually really like this team because I have a soft spot for Ian Shefflin. Like, I love this kid. Like, I think he's just
how can you not?
Yeah, he's just a basketball player. Like, throw all the pro prospects out the window, like throw all of it out. He just plays the game in such a, like, in my opinion, an enjoyable way because he just competes. I actually think I agree that they don't have like a star, but I think they have enough. I think the Zachary pickup is kind of sneaky. This is a guy who was in the ACC, was
Right.
really productive last year. So like we know he can play at this level, and now he's going to have that help around him. Same thing with Victor. I think that's another, like, they're going to beat teams up. I think that's going to be their approach. Is they're going to come in, they're going to, when they play at Duke, they know they're not more talented, but they're like, we're going to be just as big, but we're going to be big and 5 years older than you at every position. So we're just going to punch you in the face. And that, like, that's how they're going to play basketball. And, you know, honestly, I have no problem with that.
Right.
I think that gets to work. I think they're going to punish. And I think the person you're thinking about from Cincinnati is Bendigo, is who I'm assuming.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
So,
Bendigo came in and cut into his playing time. And
And most people in the country would probably lose some minutes to Aziz Bendigo, just given his athleticism.
Oh, yeah, he's one of the best
athleticism.
Yeah, he's one of the best shot blockers in the country.
Exactly. So I actually like this team. Soft spot for him. I guess, spoiler alert, I have them potentially making a March Madness bid, because I just think that it's a team they got a lot of guys who've been together. The guys they're bringing in have been successful and are, they're bringing in a pair of guys who've already been in the ACC. They're bringing in a guy at Cincinnati who's been on a good competitive program. They're not going to be the most aesthetically pleasing team to watch night in and night out, but I think Ian Shefflin has the potential to be the guy, just in an unorthodox way. He's not going to be the score 25 and hit a bunch of step back threes, a la like an RJ Davis, or have like a double digit with assists like a Nigel Pack. But he's the guy that you're going to look up and be like, wow, this guy's got like 2 steals, 2 blocks. He pulled down 13 rebounds, had 16 points, and made like a game-saving play at the end. So I like Clemson. I think they bring back a really good mix of guys. We'll see where the freshmen fit in. They didn't bring in anybody super high profile. And Dallas Thomas, their top guy, is going to be likely the 4th power forward / big on this roster, but they'll be fun to watch. I think they're going to be pretty good and pretty cool to watch this year.
All right, so the next team we have on our list is the Pitt Panthers, and they bring back, a fair amount of talent from last year, though they did lose their 2 best scorers in Bob Carrington, the freshman, who's now with the Wizards, and Blake Hinson, who I know was looking at a contract with the Lakers, so I think he ended up getting cut, I believe. They also lost Federico, who their shot blocking center, went to Texas Tech. Those were their main losses. They bring back Jared Lowe, who is a very good point guard in his own right, freshman point guard last year. They bring back 6th man of the year, Ishmael Leggett. Also bring back Zach Austin, who's kind of like a defensive ace. And the Diaz twins come back, and they are both kind of stretch 4s and 5s, little on the lanky side. Not much from the portal. Cameron Corrin comes over from Florida State. He's basically a rebounding strong guy, not a huge scorer, not even a great shot blocker. Damian Dunn comes from Houston. He started, I believe, at Temple. Not the most efficient scorer in the world, and I think he got on Kelvin Sampson's shit list last year. He has a tendency to put up some bad shots. In terms of recruiting, probably the best guy they have coming in is actually was with them last year. That's Papa Conte, a center. He was number 106 last year in the composite rankings, so he's a redshirt. And also they have coming in this year's class Brandon Cummings, a combo guard who was at 154 in the composite rankings. What I like about this team is there is a fair amount of continuity. I mean, you could just look at the players that are returning and come up with a pretty solid lineup. But beside that, the transfers and the freshmen aren't overly exciting. So I just don't know if they can replace the scoring they got from Carrington and Blake Hinson.
Yeah, I have them listed here as tentatively as like an 8 seed. And I think this team is like right in the middle. I think that core 5 they bring back actually could be their 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5.
Yep.
Like they could start them and be relatively set there. I don't like the depth. when you compare to the teams above them that are either bringing these loaded transfer classes or these loaded freshman classes, it's kind of the same team we got last year that just missed out on the tournament. They played really well down the stretch. I think they went like 10-3.
Yeah, I thought they were one of those teams that they and St. John's, I thought, should have gotten in ahead of Virginia, for example.
Yeah, no, for sure. Like, they were playing great basketball, but the concern for me is if nobody really takes that next step, you got worse. Not significantly worse, but you got worse. You lost arguably your two best players, and we don't really replace them with much on a team that just missed out in the tournament. So, the big question for me is, how does Leggett and Lowe, did they figure it out? They have the potential to be a really great backcourt. I mean, I think Lowe averaged just under 10 a game last year. Leggett is a sixth man of the year returner, which means he's probably on radars for potential all-conference, some sort of all-conference bid.
Yeah.
In theory, the increased production, the increased time and starting should help him there. But I don't know. I think this team is going to be in the mix. I won't be shocked if they go maybe knock off one of the teams we have ranked above them, give a couple teams some games, but I think they're pretty fragile. If they suffer an injury, particularly to one of those two guards, I don't really know what else they've got left in the tank. So I have them tentatively at like an 8 seed, but the ACC should be pretty battle tested. That's kind of where they're at.
Yeah, I think Lowe probably has. I mean, he's not very big, but I think he's probably the most talented player. The Diaz brothers too have some upside. So maybe they become like a 15-point, maybe Guillermo, who's the one who stayed healthy last year. He's also a little bigger than Jorge. If he stays healthy, maybe he turns into a 15-10 guy, maybe. I think Leggett, we know what we're going to get from him. We're probably going to get 13, 14 points a game, not a bad shooter. But Lowe, he was where Carrington was a jump shooter, Lowe was the driver. And Lowe really started off slowly last year, and then he really started to come on. But by the end of the season, Carrington and he made a really effective backcourt pairing. If Lowe can start to bring his jump shot around, he could be an all-conference type of player. All right, we'll move on to Syracuse. Syracuse has been kind of not Syracuse-like for probably, 3, 4, 5 years. And they lose Judah Mintz, who was kind of their do-everything combo guard for them. He went on to the pros. Malik Brown, the aforementioned Malik Brown, moved on to Duke. Quadir Copeland, who was kind of like a Swiss Army knife kind of guy for them, he moves on to McNeese State. They were the three big losses. They do bring back a handful of players, though not many of them did. Out of the 5 notable players they bring back, only 2 of them actually played significant minutes last year. And that's J.J. Starling, who really didn't build on his freshman season at Notre Dame in his first year at Syracuse. I don't know if I want to say he regressed, but he certainly didn't build upon it. Chris Bell, who's a great shooting wing, and Chance Westry, who was a top 40, top 50 recruit a couple years ago for Auburn. He's really been on the sidelines with various injuries. He should fit into the mix and perhaps even be a starter this year for them, assuming he can stay healthy. Naheem McLeod, who's like a 7'4" shot blocker, formerly Florida State guy. He missed most of last year with injury. He is back too. The most notable guy that Syracuse brings in from the portal, which I actually found interesting. I don't know how well this guy actually mixes. He just doesn't seem like a Syracuse type of player, defensively or offensively, though I know that Syracuse is now moving away from that 2-3 zone look a lot on defense. But that's Eddie Lampkin. He transfers from Colorado after having a solid year in Colorado. Eddie Lampkin just can't seem to find a place where he's happy. He's the main transfer addition, though they do bring in some other solid players from smaller schools. They also have I think what's most exciting about Syracuse is the recruiting class. They get Donnie Freeman, who's a 5-star power forward. They have Elijah Moore, who's a 4-star shooting guard. And then they have Petar. Oh, boy. Hold on, folks. Majstorovic. Majstorovic. Yeah, who's was in the Asvel system in France. He's a power forward, stretch forward type of guy, who probably is the equivalent of a 4-star, I would say. And so they do bring in a really nice freshman class. Is that good enough to help them this year? I don't know. What do you think, Drew?
Yeah, I mean, looking at Lampkin, I totally agree. I don't know if just like schematically the fit is there, but in today's kind of transfer portal arms race world, there was probably an element of how often. I mean, he's an 11.7 rebound a game guy who was on a team that won 2 games in the tournament last year and was close to winning a third, if I'm not mistaken, for Colorado. It was probably just to go get the talent figured out later. I think that's kind of becoming the model for some teams.
I agree.
Guys
and I also think that's the reason why some of them end up like with 3 centers.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. They're just going out and collecting talent and figuring it out as you go along. Freeman will be really fun to watch. He's a 6'10", moves really well. He's kind of like that classic 6'10", athletic forward, moves pretty well without the ball. The 2 big things for him, number one, which is what we kind of always concern ourselves with, I guess, is, how's the frame going to hold up? I mean, he's listed at 215, 6'10", so solid height. But again, when you get to that college landscape and you're in a conference where you're going to have to deal with some grown men who play in that 4 or 5 spot, or guards, if he has to pop out on the perimeter, and guards that are lightning quick, big, strong. So the physicality element will be interesting to see. And then how does he fit in potentially as a stretch? Doing my research on him, the jump shot looks pretty solid, but it's not something that he deploys regularly. So can he kind of evolve into that more kind of sought after stretch 4? I'm not talking about a guy who's taking 4 or 5 threes a game, but can just keep defenses honest, especially as a freshman. He's going to play for them. You don't bring in a 5-star top 15 recruit and sit him on the bench, most likely. But it would just be interesting. The collection of talent just doesn't really excite me, if I'm being honest. They just lost a lot. I think they lost 5 of their top 7 scorers. Their number 1 chancellor they bring in doesn't really seem like a home run fit for me. Maybe they change the system around Lampkin. I don't know. Like on paper, you assume he's probably going to have to start, right? You bring him in to start.
Or Nakeem McLeod, who's kind of just the opposite of Lampkin. He's the shot blocker, but doesn't really have a lot of offense.
Exactly.
Where Lampkin can't block shots, but he's very good.
12 to 13 a game.
Right.
Yeah. That would be an interesting matchup for me. This team doesn't really excite me. I have them tentative. Again, all this stuff is tentative as we get closer until everything officially starts. We haven't seen a lot of these teams play yet. So I have them kind of at the 10 spot. But as I mentioned earlier with these ACC teams, I think once you get past that top 5 or 6, it gets kind of muddled in terms of talent, coaching changes, things like that.
Right. So the next team on our list is Virginia. And of course, they are going through an unexpected coaching change of losing Tony Bennett. And I guess, we should probably pause right here. I mean, I didn't, with or without Tony Bennett, I didn't expect a lot from this team. I think they're at best middle of the pack. My thoughts on Tony Bennett, and I kind of said this in our group chat, when we first heard the news, is I think that, first of all, we have to keep in mind that Tony Bennett, rumors have been sailing around about him perhaps packing it in kind of when NIL, was really ramping up and the portal was really ramping up. So these rumors have been around for about a year. Didn't take them seriously, but Tony Bennett, if we know anything, is not a man who likes change. He likes to do things his way. He frequently doesn't play young guys. He's never been one for the portal too much. It's been kind of like, you sit around for a couple of years, wait your turn, you stick around for 4 or 5 years, and obviously that's just not going to work very well for just about anybody in this system. I also wonder, how many players really want to play in that system? Personally, when you limit possessions, you limit statistics. If you notice with Virginia players, even their steals and blocks are lower in college than they are in the NBA. Now, how often can you say that a guy blocks more shots in the NBA than he blocks in college? But if you look at DeAndre Hunter and Malcolm Brogdon and all those Virginia guys, you'll see that their steals and blocks goes up in the NBA, not because they weren't good defenders in college, but because there's just not enough possessions to stuff the stat sheet.
Yeah.
But it's also, we've kind of lamented it multiple times about teams who kind of, bring the game to a halt, that it's just not fun. And we saw some disastrous results from Virginia last year. The thing I can't get over is, how does somebody who's known for his integrity and so forth quit on his team at this stage? We haven't heard anything about health issues. I haven't.
So what I was hearing, and this makes some sense, is that internally it may have been a bit more planned, and that part of the reason that originally this was the original thought process, which now I'm hearing that who's the coach over at, was it Ed Cooley over at Georgetown?
Yeah.
Is now potentially a candidate for this job. I was hearing that one of the reasons it came out later is that Bennett was looking to get who's serving the assistant serving as interim, kind of more locked into that spot, and he knew by leaving later towards so close to the season start would have kind of forced Virginia into a position where it's like, hey, this guy's going to get the first crack at it. I've heard rumors. I don't know how valid they are. Just honestly scrolling Twitter and stuff that Ed Cooley's been in some discussions there. We'll see if there's any legitimacy to that.
Well, that's not going to do Ed Cooley's reputation any good, the way he's
I have no idea how valid or true that is. I just kind of saw it and thought it was interesting. But I was hearing that potentially it could have been a move that it was a little bit more known, just kept under wraps, and that it was a way for Bennett to get his guy kind of the first crack at the job. Huh. Again, I am not plugged into that, program. I do not work there. I do not know these men personally.
Right.
I was just reading some things that could have potentially explained why a coach who has been super successful was kind of running through the ACC for like a 6-7 year stretch would kind of step down so out of the blue. Don't have an answer, but that at least makes those are at least things that I could buy into, and at least could make sense of like Bennett wanting to take care of his guys and let his guys hand the reins over to somebody that, he had trusted, he had built a bond with, and wanted to see get first chance at kind of leading the Cavaliers forward. Again, I could be completely off. He may have literally just been one day like, I'm tired of this. I hate NIL. I hate the portal. He mentioned in his exit conference that he actually still would like to stay around college athletics and help manage and rein in this kind of new landscape that's developing.
Oh, I think there is reining in that needs to be done.
Oh, 100%.
I don't think the day is far behind where, are you ready for this? Holdouts and trades.
Yeah, it's funny. I'll own up to this. When I first started grad school, there was someone in my class who I know is not super aware of college basketball landscape, and was basically started talking about a salary cap. She said, well, they should throw a salary cap.
Oh, yeah.
At the time, I was like, well, how the hell does that work? Because there's teams that can't even have a salary cap. They don't even have money. Like, what's a salary cap going to do? And now I'm sitting here going, and not in a good way. This is not me saying she's right and I'm happy she's right. This is me going, oh my God, they're going to put a salary cap in. Like, how is this going to even work? Like, we're not that far removed from teams limiting spending, but
yeah, well, and I'll tell you what, I just think we had kids from Memphis, recently sit out practice because apparently they weren't getting paid.
We're seeing it in football. We're seeing it in football.
We had rumors last year that that there were kids that were like not playing toward the end of the season, like in their conference tournaments or the NIT or stuff like that, because they had already made agreements with other schools and didn't want to get hurt and lose their agreement.
Yeah, I mean, we're literally seeing it happen in college football, which has been the catalyst and is kind of
the UNLV quarterback.
The UNLV quarterback. There was another player, I believe, at UNLV who is now going, you know what? I've played a few games. I've showcased my ability because there's redshirt limits. You can appear in a certain number of games before your eligibility gets hit, I believe, in football. And so they said, look, we showcased. Somebody probably reached out. I think you'd be naive to assume there's not some sort of communication or contact going on. And you said, oh, you're telling me a Power 5 school is going to come along and throw me a bag of money to come play for them? Yep, I'm done.
So he shut it down so he didn't lose a year of eligibility?
Yeah. And probably to some degree stay healthy. I mean, it's probably a combination of those things, right? Like I have a year of eligibility. I want to stay healthy because if there's an offer and I keep going out there and playing and I blow my knee out, said offers revoked. I'm not in the room with these kids. I'm not in the room with Tony Bennett. I don't have an inside exact answer, but I was just somebody.
Well, sometimes we're in the room with these guys, but I personally, I mean, I just got done talking to a ton of these kids in person, but I'm afraid to bring up the money situation.
Yeah, for sure. It's a touchy subject.
I feel like it's too personal to ask.
It's almost like asking somebody their salary, which is
exactly. Well, you are really.
Yeah, and so I understand there's so many sides. It's complicated, and I know we're on the ACC, so not to make this an NIL thing, but I believe Bennett is stepping away. I think we're not that far removed from seeing a lot of these coaches step away. John Shire made a comment on Bennett retiring, basically saying it's adapt or die, but that he also understands that if you've been doing something for so long a certain way, and that's why you got into it and you fell in love with that way and that model and that method, and that's no longer working, which it's not. I mean, Virginia probably shouldn't have made the tournament last year, and they haven't won a champion. They have not won a March Madness game since they won the championship in 2019.
Right. And the year before that, they lost in the first round to a school that nobody had ever heard of before.
Exactly. So I just think that, I understand. I know how difficult. I see it day in and day out at my job at the D2 level. I was at a D1 football program. I know the strains that coaching puts on somebody. It puts on your family, physically, mentally, emotionally. It's such a tough one-track world that you exist in. So I understand him maybe hitting a wall there. And the day that, and I've always said, the day working in sports in general, I mean, for us, Rich, the day this stops being fun is the day you've lost the plot. And Bennett probably stopped having fun. He wasn't winning. Winning kind of cures everything. That smooths things over. And he's probably like, you know what? I'm going to walk away before it really implodes. He leaves on a high enough note of, hey, I made March. I won a tournament. I won a championship not that long ago. He's still walking away as Tony Bennett, 6-time ACC regular season champion, national champion. Like that's what he's walking away as. A few more years, there might be a different discussion about how Tony Bennett's fallen off and he can't coach and all these things. And that's not fair to him.
Yeah.
So
I wonder, what it's like. I mean, obviously there's all these new things you have to think about.
Yeah.
And that to me would add stress to a coach's life. But then again, you would think, the Wojciechowskis in the world and people like that are getting hired to pick up the slack in certain departments, so that the coach, I could see where some people would want to do, if you ever played Madden or even the old NCAA basketball game, where you build up your squad and you recruit freshmen and you wouldn't play them for a couple of years, but by the time they were juniors in the game, they were really ready to play and kick butt. And so, that's all really cool, but there are coaches out there that freaking can't compete with the Dukes or even the Virginias. And so they kind of might be loving life right now, thinking, shit, at least I have a chance every year. I just don't know how it feels because most of these coaches are almost all these teams. I mean, there are very few of these teams where we have a long list of the players returning.
Yep.
You know, and so I just don't. Some coaches probably appreciate starting over each year, and some coaches probably absolutely hate it. But I mean, Calipari and whoever's been at Duke is used to it.
Yeah,
They've been doing it for years.
It's just a different model. I think, and me, I've always a proponent of continuity in college basketball is a big thing. Veteran leadership is a big thing because of the model. If we were talking about every game, was a series and the talent's probably going to win out, the Dukes of the world, I'd feel super confident. And I do this year. They're loaded. But I still have seen it time and time again in my lifetime as a college basketball fan that this random, well, I won't say random school, but this school comes in with 3 fifth-year seniors, 2 fourth-year seniors, and 3 juniors in the rotation. None of them are NBA guys. Maybe one is like a second-round guy, and they go beat these powerhouse programs. And you're like, how did that happen? And it's like, well, when this is all you've lived, eat, and breathe, this one coach's program, this one system, it like the back of the hand. The guys on your team are all going to be in your wedding party, so you trust them explicitly. That carries a weight in these one-game elimination settings where, they're used to it. So I know I've been harping on this. On Virginia's team, I have them middle of the pack. I think I have them 10. They returned 2 starters in McNeely and Rode, I think were the 2 guys who started last year. The biggest issue is going to be offense again. All you have to do is go look up the box scores of these guys, like their season-long stats, and it's like 41% field goal percentage, 39% field goal percentage, 40%. And it's like, where's the offense going to come from? It's the same question we usually have. I think having Bennett on the sideline and knowing they'll defend at least was kind of a big plus. But like, they don't have a Beekman now kind of leading the way. We're like, hey, they've got that one guy who on any given game is now going to could be the best guy on the court. In country, Reese Beekman could go into a game and have a game and be the best player on the court. I don't think they have that anymore. I don't think any of the guys they bring in, whether it's Warley, Sanders, Power, none of those guys are big time scorers. They're not super efficient from the floor. I think they'll, figure it out. I think they'll grind out enough wins. They're bringing in guys who have played in ACC, Division I, Power 5 basketball, but this team does not strike much confidence in me at all. I have them at 10. I could totally see them with Bennett leaving, kind of this be a very early implosion and this team just not really do much all year.
Yeah. As you said, Reese Beekman's gone to the pros, and so is Ryan Dunn. Arguably the 2 best defenders in this conference.
Absolutely.
Certainly the 2 best players on this team last
I didn't even think about Dunn. Yeah, you lost your 2 best defenders, you lost your 2 best players, and you lost your best offensive focal point. Yeah, not great.
McNeely is the best returner. Also, Blake Buchanan was a freshman last year at center. I think he has a chance to be a really good defender and post scorer. TJ Power, I actually like him. I mean, we're talking about a 5-star last year that barely got off the bench for Duke. Yep. He's a stretch 4. I think he's going to might be the leading scorer on this team. Jalen Worley coming over from Florida State. He's okay. Elijah Saunders coming over from San Diego State. He's a solid player. Day Ames was a pretty high recruit, little point guard for Kansas State, though he had some issues controlling his temper and so forth at Kansas State. So, and their one big recruit is Jacob Kofi, another center. He was a top 100 guy, but he's probably not going to do much other than back up Buchanan probably this year. So, I mean, there is some talent, but I think even if TJ Power turns out to be like a 17-point a night guy, that's still not going to be enough to get.
They got to score like 60. They got to score like 70 points to be competitive every night. And
right,
I don't know. They're gonna, like in this conference with the big dogs. I just don't see it.
Yeah. So now we'll move on to one of the newcomers, and probably the newcomer that looks to be in the best of shape, though I will say this newcomer, being SMU, loses a crap load from last year. Zurich Phelps, shooting guard, went to Texas A&M. Tyreek Smith, power forward, went to Memphis. Samuel Williamson, forward, went to the pros, and on and on. They lost about 7 key players. Their top returner is combo guard Chucky Harris. But what's really interesting about SMU is if you look at their top 4 to 5 guys that they got out of the portal, that actually makes up a pretty nice starting lineup. You know, Matt Cross is a really good, versatile player who could definitely be all conference in this conference. You have Kevin Miller coming over for Wake Forest to play point guard. He was excellent last year for Wake Forest. Johan Traore, if memory serves me, he was a 5-star, if not a 5-star, close to it. He started at Auburn, then he went to Santa Barbara last year. He's never quite lived up to his potential, but he certainly played better last year than he had the previous year. So now this is his junior year. Kario Okendo, who's kind of bounced around, started at Georgia, then went to Oregon. Now he's here at SMU. He's a very athletic wing. And Jarrell Colbert, a big center from Kansas State, give you some rebounds and block shots. So just those 5 guys right there gives you a pretty solid starting lineup. Is it enough to make the NCAA tournament or get out of the middle of the pack here? Probably not. But I think they could be competitive with teams like Pittsburgh and Syracuse and, of course, Virginia.
Yeah, I think like right away, Andy Enfield's there from USC, super disappointing year with the Trojans last year, comes to SMU, joins them as they make the jump to the ACC. I had heard that Chuck Harris was a potential guy who was going to go portaling, so getting him to stick around is a nice little, first step coup. I like the class that they bring in. I think Matt Cross is going to catch a lot of people off. I think Matt Cross and I think Johan Traore have a chance to really kind of put themselves into that national spotlight. Cross was really good at UMass last year. Traore's out my way, so I've seen him play quite a bit. He was like a 14-6 a game kind of guy, 15-6 a game kind of guy. Really efficient from the floor. Absolutely no shooting. Like he's not a stretch at all. He's 6'11". He's going to play that 6'11" at the rim. But they're nice pieces. The question is, though, is like none of these guys are these guys Power 5 ACC caliber players. Like everyone here, Harris, Cross, Traore, did what they did, whether it was in the American, whether it was in at the Big West. So it'll be interesting to see. I do like the pieces. I just don't know if I trust them enough to go toe-to-toe with some of these other teams. I have them, again, tentatively at 12, but again, these teams are pretty mixed in there. If at least 2 of those transfers figure it out and pop, I think they'll be competitive, and I think they'll catch some people by surprise. But, it's a matter of those guys being able to – they basically have to take the production from last year at their schools last year and replicate that as close to possible. I'm not expecting Traore, for example, to come in and average 15 and 7 in the ACC off the rip. But if he can come in and give you, 10 or 12, pull down 5-6 boards. He shot damn near 60% from the floor last year, so shooting the high 50s. For example, just using him as an example because I'm familiar with him. That'd be a big coup for him. It's going to take a couple years for Enfield to get this going. I had heard that SMU is going to and has already invested quite a bit into the program already, especially with them making the jump to the Power 5 or make the jump to the ACC. So this is going to be a team that I think will be okay with a chance to hopefully build on some more given the resources. And if maybe they, if they can, out of all these middle pack teams, if they can find their way towards the top half, maybe take that single digit seed, like an 8 or 9 seed, that'll be a good year for them.
Right. Yeah, one thing I was always disappointed with Enfield is he never seemed to be able to harness the talent that he had. And, USC was always, playing these grinders. They had all these athletes and, they'd be playing games, 63 to 62. And again, are we seeing the Tony Bennett syndrome where, when you think about when Enfield first started, he had that, flying circus, down there, Florida Gulf Coast where, they went up and down the court. And I would like to see some of that come back instead of playing all these grinders, especially given all the talent that he's had over the years. Sure. All right. So now we move to Georgia Tech and they're pretty interesting in the sense that, they lost 5 of their top 8 players from last year, but 3 of their top 4 return. And the only real stud that they lost from last year is Miles Kelly. And Miles Kelly, actually, he went to Auburn, shooting guard. He actually had an off year, friend of the show, by the way, had a real off year shooting wise, very inefficient last year. He's changing teams, going to Auburn, but they bring back surprise freshman last year, Bay Dongo, who really played very well for Georgia Tech out of nowhere last year. They also bring back Kawasi Reeves and Nate George, who was also a freshman last year. And I think what makes this team, first of all, we got to remember Georgia Tech was like giant killers last year. I don't know how many top 10 teams they beat, but
they beat, if I'm not mistaken, Duke, UNC, and Clemson. All three made the Sweet 16.
Right. And so what's interesting about this team is they do bring in two solid guys from the portal. Javian McCullum, combo guard from Oklahoma, and Luke O'Brien, forward from Colorado. So those guys probably round out the starting lineup. But they also had a really nice recruiting class. Now, keep in mind that Dongo and George are both sophomores, and now they bring in this recruiting class. It includes shooting guard Jaden Mustafa, 59th in the composite rankings, forward Darian Sutton, 105 in the recruiting rankings, and Dorian Onwuchikwa, a center at number 121. So you're talking about three 4 stars right there. So I think this team's gonna be a little young, but I think they could be giant killers again here and there, and maybe I don't know. I suppose a lot probably depends on what they get from the freshmen. But this team, maybe we have them a little low here on this list.
Yeah, I didn't know where to rank them. It all boils down to how much of a step does Ndongo, George, and Reeves take, in my opinion. They all played close to 30 minutes a game last year. They all averaged, I think, right around 10 points a game. And let me check my note. Yeah, like 9.8, 10 points per game. They beat those schools. How much of a step do they take is the question. The pieces they bring in are nice. So I think this is another team that's going to fluctuate up, like, power rankings and conversations a lot, because they totally have the ability, because we saw it last year. They bring back 3 guys that on paper should all get better. They add some nice freshmen, some nice pieces. I don't think game in and game out the talent's there to go contend with the big dogs in this conference. But on any given night, especially if these guys make the proper, steps in their, trajectory, they're going to be pretty competitive. So I didn't really know what to do with them. They were a team that I fluctuated in rankings. Like, I could totally see them being above like a Syracuse, a Virginia, and SMU, and I have them in that 11 spot, so right in the mix there. But this is another team that's like, I got to see it to believe it. And what I really want to see is them not just be able to take down a Clemson or a Duke or North Carolina, but be able to consistently
win the games that they should against Boston College. And
exactly, like they need to beat a Boston College, or like when they play a Pittsburgh, who they're kind of probably in that neck and neck with, they have to win. Mm-hmm. It can't be, hey, we beat Duke and then we lost to Pittsburgh, Syracuse, and Virginia 3 games in a row. Right. So this is a see it to believe it kind of team. But I definitely think the talent is there. Out of all the teams we talked about so far, they probably have, well, I would say Pittsburgh is better, but out of Syracuse, Virginia, SMU, I think they have the chance to definitely be better than those 3 teams as long as they can kind of figure it out and keep the train rolling.
Yeah, I think middle of the pack is the worst for them, and I definitely think it wouldn't shock me if they finish top 5 in this conference. Wouldn't shock me. But a lot of youth. All right, now we're starting to get into the teams that are really kind of starting over. Lost a ton of talent, and one of those teams, unfortunately, is. And I say unfortunately because we have a good relationship with Florida State. Leonard Hamilton, you'd like to see him, close his career with a Final Four. I mean, he was so close to COVID year, and then that season didn't happen. I mean, Dick Vitale wrote a book and said that, Florida State was going to win it that year. And I had picked my tournament, and I thought Florida State was the favorite to win it that year too. But really, since that season, the Florida State program has kind of gone downhill. And this year, they lost a ton of talent. The biggest name on the list, Baba Miller, the leading pro prospect on last year's squad. And and he's taken his talents to Florida Atlantic. They only have 3 out of like their top 10 rotation pieces. They only returned 3 of those guys. The good news is Player of the Year candidate Jamir Watkins is one of those players. Also, I think a Defensive Player of the Year candidate. Jamir Watkins has turned out to be a kind of do-everything guy who could probably play anywhere from shooting guard to power. Well, definitely can play shooting guard, small forward, probably can run the point for you at times, and maybe even play the 4 at times. And they also bring back Chandler Jackson and Taylor Bowen, both considered really, they're good athletes. They just haven't really quite put it together on the floor yet. Good physical specimens. But then, you start looking at what Florida State's bringing in, and the best player, I'd say, out of the portal is Malik Ewan. He's a former, he started his career at Ole Miss, then went to South Plains College. By the way, South Plains College is now where Ontario Morris is, if you were curious where he went. And hopefully, well, I'm not going to talk about Ontario Morris much more than that, but that's where he's at. But anyway, Malik Ewan, was a former high recruit. He's a big guy, big center. He joins the mix. The rest of the guys are not overly notable. The recruiting class isn't bad, but it's not great. They bring in center Alir Malouk. He was number 144 in the composite. Daquan Davis, point guard at number 111, and AJ Swinton, a wing at number 162. And based the way this depth chart looks, those guys are probably, all 3 of those freshmen are probably going to be playing significant minutes in Leonard Hamilton's system that likes to go anywhere from 9 to 11 deep.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of high hopes for this team. I mean, I think they need a Player of the Year season from Jamir Watkins to like really threaten anybody. Maybe I'm just not as familiar with some of the guys coming in. I know I'm not as familiar with some of the guys coming in, but I mean, they lost. Watkins is the only starter who's back. They were, I think, like 80th in KenPom last year, which, isn't the end all be all, but, they were definitely not in tournament contention, well out of that range. So, Leonard Hamilton's like 76 now, like you said, Rich. I'd love to see him maybe make one last run at it, but I don't see this team being the one to do it. If Watkins is even just the same player last year, which was 16 points a game, close to 30 minutes a game, they're going to be in trouble. So now you're asking him to take on an even bigger burden. I think he's more likely to win Defensive Player of the Year than Player of the Year, just because he will compete. He will defend. Spoiler alert, I have him as one of my picks for that award, but I don't see there being enough here for them to do a lot. And that's if Watkins has a great year. If he's the same player or at all regresses or gets hurt, or I don't think this team's going to be very good at all.
No,
So
if something happens to him,
that's what I'm saying. Like sometimes we talk about teams being beholden to one player to reach their peak. We're talking about them being beholden to one guy just to stay afloat. And we're not even talking about him he has to be better than he was last year. And it's like, how much better can he be when he was really solid last year? He had a good year last year. Now we're basically saying, yeah, he's probably going to put up close to 20 points a game for this team to be night in and night out competitive. Could he do it? You'd like to hope so, but I don't have a lot of faith for this team. I don't have a lot of faith for a lot of the teams we're about to talk about, if I'm being honest. But I'm not really seeing it for the Seminoles.
All right, so we'll move on to another new team in the conference. That's California, and basically they lost their top 8 players. It's flat out. They don't really return much of anything. In the portal, they brought in some interesting players, including Andrei Stojakovic, the son of the great Peja Stojakovic. Didn't have a great year last year for Stanford, but Stanford players have under what's his face? Was the
Jared Haas.
Yeah, under Jared Haas had a way of underperforming at Stanford and then doing well at other places. I would suspect that Stojakovic is going to kind of break out this year for Cal. They also bring in another really interesting guy, and that's Rydas Patridis. He says he's not Greek, but if that's not a Greek name, I don't know what is. He is a really interesting player, 6'7", 210. Listen to this stat line he had last year at Air Force. 16 points per game, over 6 rebounds a game, almost 4 assists per game, 1.6 steals per game, and almost 1 block per game. And he shot 49 from the field, 35 from deep, and 66 from the free throw line. This guy is a total stat sheet stuffer. Now, he did it in the Mountain West. Can he do it at the ACC? I think so. I don't think the Mountain West is that much inferior to the ACC. So I'm really interested in seeing this guy play, because I have to admit I didn't see Air Force play at all last year. So I'm looking forward to it. And, they also bring in, some other notable guys who were either high recruits or did pretty well at their previous schools. One guy I want to mention, one guy a lot of people probably know, and that's Matty Sissoko, the big, powerful center from Michigan State, who kind of had a down year last year. And Javon Blackshear, former leading scorer for the WAC a few years ago, and then he suffered a really bad knee injury, and he came back last year, wasn't quite himself, but then again, the Grand Canyon team really had transformed into something else, so he played kind of a minor role, and he actually might start at point guard this year and surprise some people at Cal. So I'm interested to see not only Ritas Petratus, but also Javon Blackshear for Cal. But overall, it just looks like too many new pieces, too many guys that are, have yet to prove that they could do it at this level. So what are you thinking?
Yeah, I'm a Mark Madsen believer. I think Stanford is going to regret for a long time not getting him, being that he was a Stanford guy, and that not only did he came back to the pack at the time, but he went to their biggest rival. I'm a Mark Madsen believer. I think we saw the improvement last year. I think this first year in the ACC is going to be tough. I just think talent-wise, I saw Stojakovic play. I definitely don't think he was used right. I definitely think he'll be better. But he's kind of one of those guys where, like, when you see him play at this level, you start to go like, hey, yeah, he's a 5-star, but he's not the same kind of 5-star. Like, not all 5-stars are created equal, and I think that's where you start to see the gap. I think they're going to be super competitive. I think they're going to be really well coached. I think the good thing that you take away from this, getting a Blackshear, a Sissoko, a Petrides, a Stojakovic, is that as Madsen continues to grow, he's going to be able to get guys in the portal. He's going to be competitive. He's proven that he can go get guys who are contributors and can play. So year one, I think, will be a little bit rough. I have them at 13. I think they're going to be competitive because if he's a good coach, I stand on that. And I think he's going to get the maximum from these guys. I just think that talent, it's just going to be a talent gap. It's going to boil down to it's a talent gap, 100%. So unless, a Petrides comes in, does what he did in the Mountain West and makes that the norm in the ACC, Sissoko, I think, will have a better year last year. I think last year he just wasn't right throughout the year. I think he'll be better. We know he can play at this level from a physical standpoint. I like Blackshear. He's a veteran guy. I think this is his 6th year of college basketball. At one point we watched him score 16 points a game. Now, again, the WAC is a much different beast. So I think there's enough pieces to night in and night out. They'll, give teams some fits, and they might, catch somebody by surprise, especially if, teams have to make that long road trip out to them. I think that is something we're going to be talking about with Stanford and Cal. The most dangerous thing about them is going to be teams looking past them and teams having to go get on a 6-hour flight and come out this way to play them. Yeah. That I think might be something that plays into their favor.
Of course, they're gonna hate it when the shoe's on the other foot.
They're gonna hate it when they have to do it. But I think I looked at their schedules. The big dogs, I don't think UNC, I don't think Duke are coming out to them this year. But when some of those more middling teams have to make the trek out there, I could totally see them catching, and I don't know their schedule, but I can see them totally catching like a Pittsburgh or a Syracuse with their pants down after a 6-hour flight. So big Mark Madsen guy. Really hope that this is continued positive growth because I think he's doing the right thing. I mean, we all remember how bad Cal was a couple of years ago. I mean, they barely were a Division I program, and for him to prove that he can win last year. He got Jalen Tyson drafted, and now you're looking at him get into the portal, get active, and go get guys that have good pedigree, good resumes, all positive steps for a program still a couple years out from being anywhere near the threat that they were a couple years ago when, Jaylen Brown was there or anything like that.
Right. So next up on our list is another new team in the conference and also Cal's rival. And that's Stanford. Stanford lost. They had a lot of talent. They've had a lot of talent for a while, and just under Jared Haas, it never came together. This year they lost Spencer. This coming season, going into the season, they lost Spencer Jones to the pros. Stojakovic goes to Cal. Kanan Carlisle goes to Indiana. Brandon Angel goes to Oregon. Mike Jones graduated. Jared Bynum graduated. They do bring back a couple of very good players. Maxi Renault, the Frenchman, who's probably a senior now, but he's been getting better every year. He's, I think, I don't know about it. He's probably not a player of the year candidate in this conference, but certainly an all-conference type of player. Ryan Agarwal is a solid player for them as well. In the portal, I think they got some nice pieces. Darian Saron, not many people know him, but UC Irvine will know that he was a freshman for Irvine last year, the Anteaters. And I really think this guy is a guy to watch for pro potential. Jalen Blake's former high recruit comes over from Duke, point guard. Chisholm Akpara averaged over 16 points per game for Harvard last year. One of the better scorers in the Ivy League comes over. And Ozzie Sellers from USC didn't get a lot of playing time, but when guy plays, he's a bucket. So I'm excited about those 4 transfers, the 2 leftovers, and that's where it stops. There's not much else. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think they're going to be pretty bad. Like I said, they're going to be all over the place. I was kind of surprised Reno came back. He threw his name in the portal with Carlisle. And when Carlisle left, I thought he wasn't going to be far behind. Maybe he understands the value of a Stanford degree. And he's like, hey, he is just, I'm not, all joking aside, he might be like, look,
yeah,
the ACC. So he's going to, for a pro future career standpoint, he's going to be on the big markets. He played pretty well last year against the top teams for the most part. I remember, I think the last game that I watched him in, well, he was horrible when they lost to Washington in their tournament. I remember watching that. He didn't do anything, but he was really good against Arizona. He had a really good game against Washington the first time they played. So the kid can absolutely hoop. I kind of wish he went somewhere else from a basketball standpoint, but he's going to stay. Outside of that, I'm not super impressed with his roster. I think Kyle Smith's definitely going to have his work cut out for him. Maybe they beat some people. It all hinges on his Reno and all conference talent or not. If he's not, then I don't really know how many guys, like how many ace they have on his roster.
He's their Jamir Watkins.
Yeah, he averaged 16 and 10 last year. If he does not do that this year, they're going to be bad. I think worst team in the conference bad, because the rest of these guys don't scream ACC caliber to me. He's the only one that I go, okay, I've seen him play those big games, have those big games against top tier opponents in the pack in preseason or non-conference games for them. But maybe I just have a bad taste in my mouth still from the Jared Haas era. I don't have high expectations for Stanford. I have them at 17. Maybe they get up to 15 or 16. They're going to be a bottom of the pack for sure.
I agree. But getting rid of Haas, who's somebody ever since this show started was we've complained about Stanford players not being used, right. And to see those Stanford players leave and then start to live up to their potential at other places.
He might be, and I'd have to really say, but I think since we've been doing the show, there's an argument to be had that he has it's the biggest indictment against him that he's had 6 guys go on to other programs and be great. Cormac and Harrison end up at UNC and are great. Who is the Carlisle? Well, we'll see what Carlisle does.
What about Michael O'Connell, the point guard for NC State?
Yes,
he did nothing.
And
last year he's in the final, and then he's in the Final Four. He goes to NC State.
I totally forgot about him. Yeah, I don't know. Big indictment. We'll see. I hope Stanford's good. It's more fun for me in college basketball around the Bay Area when
you know who's sad to see Haas go? Kyle Neptune of Villanova, because now
he's the number one.
He moves to the top slot of coaches that need to go. And
yeah,
on Hoops Prospects podcast,
the hot
chopping board. Now Kyle Neptune is on it.
Box ticket, Mr. Neptune.
Wait till we do the Big East show, and I already have my speech planned about how Kyle Neptune can take a perfectly good NBA prospect and turn him into somebody who's no longer draftable. And he can do it over and over and over.
I mean, impressive. It's actually impressive.
It is, but I mean, Cam
Whitmore.
Cam Whitmore. He turned him into a top 5 pick into the steal of the draft by falling to 20. All right. So we'll move on to the Fighting Irish. The one significant loss to Fighting Irish was they lost Kerry Booth, who was their big prize recruit last year. He was a 4-star, about number 60 or so in the composite rankings. He moves on to Illinois. Interestingly enough, though, he was probably like the 7th biggest contributor on the Irish last year. He just, I don't know if it was him or the coach or whatever, but he just didn't get a ton of playing time. Everybody else who actually played significant minutes for the Irish last year, except for maybe Matt Zona, is back, including freshman of the year, Marcus Burton. So none of these guys beside Burton is anything to write home about. However, they bring in Matt Alaco, friend of the show, nickname of one of my favorite nicknames in sports, Mush. And Mush was on the show, and he's because he has a mush mouth and he doesn't shut up, but he's a great guest to have on the podcast. And by the way, he says he doesn't shut up, so I'm not saying that. So he is the top guy that Notre Dame brings in from the portal. He is your prototypical college point guard. He is intense. He makes the right play. He takes the right shots. Matt Alaco might not play in the NBA, but he definitely could play in Europe if he so desires, and he is a baller. And then Notre Dame had a pretty nice recruiting class. They bring in their top recruit is small forward Sir Muhammad, a 4-star at number 68 in the composite rankings. Also another 4-star in Cole Serta at wing at number 126, and center Garrett Sundra, a center at 190 in the composite rankings, a 3-star. So this is the deepest Notre Dame team I have seen in ages. Now, the problem is they don't have a lot of top-level talent, so that's why we're talking them at the bottom. However, if Notre Dame does have a knack, and they always have, going all the way back to the Digger Phelps days, of taking freshmen and having them star right out of the gate. And so if Sir Muhammad can come out and be like a 15-point-a-night scorer to complement Marcus Burton, this team might be in the upper half of the conference. That's a big maybe, because really there's not a ton of talent here, but at least there's depth. They do have solid players and a lot of them that they can mix and match.
Yeah, I mean, it boils down to, I think they're kind of the antithesis of what we've been talking about with Stanford and Florida State, where it's like they're beholden to one guy being the dude. And while that one guy we know has the potential to, and Marcus Burton was really good last year, so maybe he takes a leap and like kind of enters that conversation. So I don't want to say that they don't have a guy who has like kind of that top tier, was freshman of the year last year. So I've gone back and forth with them because I'm not necessarily the biggest believer across the board outside of Burton in terms of like the top to bottom talent. But I will say it is nice to see a team that can withstand an injury, a team that potentially could have guys that plug and play if projected starters don't work out, when you compare to some of these other bottom teams where we're like, well, hopefully this guy averages 20 and 10 a game and is an all-conference, lock, or they're going to be really bad. So I think Notre Dame is solid, unspectacular, unfortunately, but solid. And that's a better starting point than being stuck to one guy or being flat out bad. So I don't have too much to say, or add, I should say, But I actually like Marcus Burton. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people now that the reins are going to be fully handed over to him, and he's going to have like that year under his belt. I think he's going to surprise a lot of people.
And he's going to have the freedom to reign. He's not going to be Matalako Matalako's a good shooter and a good playmaker. And so he's going to have the responsibility of running that team. So Burton could focus on scoring,
which is what he wants to do.
Right. Exactly.
Which I think is a huge plus, because with the when you can give him the freedom to do what he wants to do and what he's kind of better at doing, I think Burton has a sneaky good year this year. I don't want to say sneaky. He was a freshman of the year. I think he's gonna have a good year this year. I think he's an all conference dude for sure. All conference talent for sure.
Right. All right, so next team on our list is Virginia Tech, and we only got 2 teams left, so we're at what we consider the very bottom of the conference. And I would say basically Virginia Tech loses their top 6 players, including point guard Sean Padula, who was an all-conference player. He goes to Ole Miss, and shooting guard Hunter Couture, who went to the pros. They also lost Lynn Kidd, center, to Miami. Tyler Nickel, a small forward, went to Vanderbilt. And the list goes on. And so out of their top 8 players, they bring back player number 7 and maybe player number 8. And unfortunately, player number 8 is Brandon Rischsteiner, and he may have to start, because it was announced recently that Hasier Miller, who was involved in that Temple gambling scandal, was kicked off of Virginia Tech. This Hasier Miller was either Virginia Tech's number 1 or number 2 prize from the portal. So they were counting on him being a point guard. This is a guy who put up, double digits in scoring and also was a good playmaker. Gone. And this is a team that even with Miller didn't have a ton of depth. To me, there's one bright spot on this team, and that's another transfer. Tobi Lawal, guest on this show, is going to be a guest on this show. Power forward from Virginia Commonwealth. And at VCU, this kid didn't get a ton. He wasn't a starter, didn't get a ton of playing time. But on this team, he's going to be out there every night. Probably playing 30 minutes a game. He's super athlete, probably one of the best athletes in the country, and a great defender. Now, can he take his game up the next notch to be an offensive player? But I don't think there's any hope for Virginia Tech.
Yeah, I will add nothing other than I think Lawal is going to contend for a defensive player of the year, because I think that's what's going to keep him on the court. I think the offense will, just because he's going to have to play a lot, is going to just kind of come. But I don't really like this roster without Miller. You really start to question, like, where is the scoring and the offense?
I mean, because even Tobi, as good as he is, isn't a scorer. At least not right now.
Yeah, he's like a 7 to 8 point per game kind of guy, I think, which is
he'll probably get it up to 12.
Yeah, given the need, he'll probably be a double-digit scorer. But in the perfect role, he's in the perfect role for him. He's a defensive hound you just unleash on the court, and he gets his offense through putbacks, transition, steals, a few half-court sets in there. But you're not running offense through him. If you're running a half-court set with Tobi being the guy you're trying to get a shot for, your offense isn't very good. Now, I'm not saying that's what they're going to do, but he's the one bright spot. I think he has I think he's a total flight risk to open up some eyes and maybe even transfer after this year.
Yeah.
I don't see him. I think
when we talked to him, that interview we're going to roll very shortly, he didn't know. None of us knew that Hasier Miller was out the door. So, All right. So now we'll move on to Boston College. Boston College really had a solid team last year. You know what? They lost their top 4 players, and they were good players. Quentin Post went to the pros. Jaden Zachary went to Clemson. Claudel Harris went to Mississippi State, really good scorer. And Devin McLaughlin, a forward, went to Vanderbilt. He was an all-around stat sheet stuffer. All these guys are gone. And what they're bringing in from the portal, I mean, the best players are probably shooting guard Deion Brown from the aforementioned Maryland, Baltimore County, and center Chad Venning, a good shot blocker, but that's about all he does, from Bonaventure. I mean, this team's gutted. Gutted.
Yeah, I have nothing to add. They're not going to be very good.
You can just yell gutted.
Yeah, they're gutted. They're 100%. Quentin Post, shout out the Warriors, is gone. Jaden Zachary's, they're all gone. I mean, like they didn't really replace them with anybody that, like, I'll be honest, I'm looking at some of these guys and I'm like, I don't even know some of these guys, to be completely honest. Like, I'm not even familiar with their game at all. So I can't even speak to how Roger McFarland's going to step in and fill these roles, because I don't really know anything about him.
They didn't do well in the portal. And you know what? The weird thing of it is, beside Post, they could have run it back. Yeah. So all they needed, if they could have kept Zachary, Harris, and McLaughlin, and Madsen, who was a nice, kind of 6-man type of guy, if they could have kept those guys, this team would be competitive. It would be up there with like Pitt.
But, yeah, 100%.
But without them, they're basement bound.
This is a team where it's like when people talk about the portal and the damage that's doing, I think like this is kind of a good team to evaluate and go, like, you lose Quentin Post. You lose, okay, he was gone, fine. We knew he was probably going to leave. That's totally fine. But you look and go, you could have run back a really strong core 4, and, you bring in maybe a freshman, you go get 1 or 2 transfers, and you got a 6-man. They could have, in theory, it's not that improbable to imagine this team putting out a really solid 6-man rotation. If those 4 come back and maybe one of these guys hits, and now you're like you said, they're competitive. Nobody was expecting this team to go toe-to-toe with Duke or, go up to Chapel Hill and go dominate. But it just kind of sucks that, like, how quickly the fortunes change for a program.
Mm-hmm.
When their season ended, there's probably optimism of, hey, we're going to be able to bring back a pretty nice rotation. We'll figure it out, hopefully 1 or 2 pieces from being a competitive team. That doesn't happen, and the exact opposite does. And now we're like, yeah, this, in my opinion, I think this is actually by a decent margin the worst team in the conference.
You know what's funny about all the Big East teams that went to the ACC? Is they used to be, like, most of them used to be pretty damn dominant teams.
Yeah.
I mean, even Boston College was a lot better at basketball, in the Big East than they, maybe toward the end they started to stink, but, like 80s and 90s, Boston College was really a good program. And Pittsburgh was even better. Syracuse was even better. And now these teams are afterthoughts in the national landscape. I don't know if the ACC has really been kind to most of those teams that transferred to the ACC. All right. So now we'll move on to our predictions. Not many surprises here, at least for the champion. Drew is going with UNC. I'm going with Duke, but we both said, we could see those two teams swapping or, being, it's not really matter. They're both going to be in the tournament. So then, as far as at-large bids, we both like 5. Drew is picking Duke, Wake, Miami, Louisville, and Clemson. I am going with UNC, Wake, Miami, NC State, and then I have an either-or situation between Louisville, Clemson, Pitt, and Syracuse. And to be honest, I think it's probably going to be Louisville, but we acknowledge that Louisville has a ton of talent, but we're just not sure they can bring it together because they're all new pieces. Player of the year, Drew is going with Hunter Salas. I like that pick. Wake Forest. And I am going for RJ Davis to repeat. So that's not a bad selection. For defensive player of the year, how about this? We're both going with Tobi Lawal, though Drew has Tobi Lawal or Jamir Watkins. Guess what? Who are our guests today? Tobi Lawal and Jamir Watkins. So we have we're defensive-oriented show here. But, Malik Brown, the transfer from Syracuse going to Duke, could be in that discussion as well. So I thought about him. And then newcomer of the year, we both like Cooper Flagg. No surprise there. Though I heard at a recent scrimmage, our boy, even Malach, is it Malach?
I've said I think it's Malach. I think it is Malach. I
Malach.
think that's what we
Yeah,
have.
I think it's Cayman Malach. I think he went crazy, scoring something like, I don't know, like 18 points in 13 minutes or something like that.
They destroyed Arizona State. Did you see the final score of that scrimmage?
No.
It was like 104 to like 47 or something.
Oh my God. And Arizona State is, a respectable team. I mean, they're not.
It was actually pretty crazy. It was pretty wild.
So any comments on our picks? We don't have a lot of dissension here.
No, I mean I went UNC just because I made this earlier. I think they have better returners. Duke has the better newcomers.
Right.
And I think I could totally see it flip-flopping. Those are my 1-2. I just think UNC, it boils down to in a crunch time game, it's on the line. I want RJ Davis taking a shot over a freshman, no matter how good I think that freshman is. I just think that RJ Davis, Seth Trimble, Elliot Cadeau, like those guys have been there, done that. They bring in some solid transfers. Hunter Salas, I think for me I think it is hard to repeat in college. RJ Davis was my second. Like that would have been my fallback pick because I think he's going to put up the numbers. He's the alpha on that team now, like unquestioned. He's the guy. But Salas, I think, had a really awesome year last year. And I think for that Wake Forest team to hit their peak, he's going to have to be the guy. I mean, he had 17 a game last year. I will not be shocked if he gets close to 20. And I think if he gets to those marks and Wake Forest does what we're anticipating them to do, which is be a top 4 team at worst in this conference, I think he's going to be the guy that gets it. Defensive player of the year, we talked about for both Watkins and Tobi. They're the best players on their team, in my opinion, respective teams. Watkins is going to have to do a lot of carrying the load, so I could see that hurting his defensive upside if he offensively has to exert so much offensively. Right. I think he is more than talented enough on both sides of the ball to get recognition there. And then I think Tobi Lawal is going to have to kind of, be the guy defensively at a minimum for Tech. And then offensively, we'll see what happens. And then Cooper Flagg, what else? There's nothing else to really say. He's been the most highly touted player or incoming player in the country now for upwards of 6 months. I think he has all the tools. And like I said, going back to when we talked about him, this kid's made of the right stuff. He's not going to shy away from the moment. His nickname is the main event. He's from Maine. I think it's not only is it fitting, and I'm glad to see nicknames making a comeback. The NBA needs to get their nickname game up. College basketball's nicknames are way better. But I think he's made of all the right stuff. I'm really excited to see him play. And, I'm seeing people give him, first team All-American, conference player of the year. And we've seen it happen before plenty of times. So I'm not saying it's out of the question. I just always want to pump the brakes a little bit. But I definitely think he's newcomer of the year. Kid's a stud. He's going to have some big, big games at Duke.
I agree. All right. So we shall roll those interviews with first with Jamir Watkins and then with Tobi Lawal. And then we'll wrap up the show. Our first special guest today is Florida State senior Jamir Watkins. Last season, the 6'7" guard/forward averaged 15.6 points, 6 rebounds, 2.8 assists, and 1.9 steals per game while shooting 46% from the floor. An all-around producer, Jamir ranked in the top 10 of the ACC for both player efficiency rating and plus minus. Jamir, welcome to the show. How you doing today?
I'm doing good.
All righty. How's the weather in Tallahassee? Has Florida State been greatly affected by Hurricanes Milton or Helene?
No, unfortunately, we wasn't affected by either one, so we're grateful.
Yeah. I know people in the middle of the state, Tampa, St. Pete, are all getting hit hard, so thoughts go out to them.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question. If you ever were a starter on Sunday Night Football, would you say Jamir Watkins, Trenton Catholic?
You said what I what?
Would you say Jamir Watkins, Trenton Catholic? Would you say, how some football players say their high school instead of their college?
Nah, I probably would say Florida State.
Right. I was just curious. I'm really close to Trenton. So just curious about your ties in Jersey. It's kind of amazing how many players actually come from the state but don't stay in the state. So you tested the NBA waters this past spring. What did that process involve, and what did you learn from it?
I was blessed to be invited to the combine and being able to go work out for a few teams. So it was definitely a blessing. I would say I matured from it, learned a lot of new things, and picked up a lot of habits, good habits from teams and stuff, and what they want to see in me, and what they think I should do, and what's going to help me excel at the next level. So it was a great experience, something that I came back to pouring into the younger guys that we got.
Right, right. Did what you took from that process, did it influence how you trained in the off season?
Yeah, most definitely. I'm still doing all the workouts that I've been doing over the summer and stuff, so just staying in shape.
Is there anything in particular they said, we need to see you do this better or this better, or, because you pretty much have an all-around game and have been steadily in each year in your career, you've steadily improved pretty much across the board. So is there anything they wanted you to focus on?
Not really. They love my game. They said I could get better and mature in certain areas of my game, but really just ball screen reads and taking on a being a better defender, just guarding the best player, that comes with a lot. So they thought I did good in the areas that I showed the previous season. So I know one more season I can mature more and hopefully be in a better position going back into it.
Right, right. You started your career at VCU, and I think back then you were generally known as an athletic defensive type. Somewhat ironically, you go to the ACC, bigger school, and you become a full-time starter last season with the Seminoles. Can you talk about your development from a freshman up to now?
I think my development and majority of where my most of my game comes from is just like where I grew up, playing and stuff. It was rough. You played in the park a lot, so you pick up on like how the older guys are playing. They're playing physical, they're getting downhill. Talking a lot of trash, going after each other. So I think that's where I picked that up from. Going into VCU, I kind of, like you said, was more defensively playing more like a 3-and-D role, which changed when I got over to Florida State, taking on a bigger role. That was part of what I talked about with Coach Ham and why I committed over here. Me taking on a bigger role, him seeing something in me that others didn't see, that I've seen, majority of my whole time playing basketball. But just coming in here, taking on a bigger role and them trusting in me, and I was grateful to be placed in that position.
Yeah, I always thought there were certain players out there. I noticed you since your freshman season, and there are certain players out there. You're like, come on, play this guy more, And I always had that feeling when you were at VCU. So last season was nice for me to watch, to finally see you, get to do your thing. How much did Coach Hamilton have to do with your decision to come to Florida State?
He had a lot to do with it. I would say I only knew one other person when I committed, and that was Jalen Worley, because he's
Right.
from the area, so Coach Ham had a lot to do with it. He sat down, spoke with me and my mom, my little sister, and just told us, kept it real, and everything that he said, he's held himself to it, and he's told the truth about everything he preached to us.
Right. How would you describe your relationship with Coach now?
My relationship with Coach now is just building and getting better than it was before. We both understand what's this upcoming year is about, and we both see the plan, and we got a good vision, and he knows that. Well, I know that he's put other players in positions to fulfill their dreams, so I know that he's gonna help me, reach mine.
Right, right. Coach Hamilton seems to me, from afar, of course, to be one of those guys that you can trust. And I mean, really trust. He's not going to, excuse my language, but he's not going to screw you over. Is that a good observation from
Yeah.
afar by me?
Yeah.
Okay. So at this point, as I said before, you have steadily improved across the board, and expanded your game. How would you describe yourself? Because I don't know if you noticed, but in the introduction, I didn't call you a guard. I didn't call you a forward. I called you a guard/forward. So how would you describe your game right now?
I think that's a great way to describe my game, a guard/forward. I feel like I could play 1 through 4, offensively or defensively. So just being a mismatch nightmare and somebody that's versatile to guard 1 through 4, and just a plug and play guy for both levels, college and NBA.
Right.
Somebody that'll fit in right away.
The Seminoles haven't made the tournament since 2021. Of course, the COVID year was horrible for Florida State. I thought they were going into March Madness before it was canceled. I thought Florida State was going to win the national championship. Dick Vitale wrote a book saying that Florida State was going to win the national championship that year. But they haven't made the tournament since 2021. And this year's squad features a lot of relatively inexperienced talent, including 6 freshmen. In your opinion, how is the team shaping up, and how is it going to be different from last year's squad?
The difference I see from last year's squad to this year, I would say, is definitely more spacing. We got more shooters. I feel like we got more willing passers. So we got more of a connected group, which started in the summer with us like doing outside activities, outside of basketball, outside of practice, which is going to lead to us being a great communication team that's on the court, that bonds well and just are moving as one, and it's going to be real fun to watch.
Did you have a team trip this summer?
Not a team trip, but it's just like outside activities like bowling, going to, arcade centers, amusement parks, things like that. Just spending time with each other, getting to know, because we got at least 9 new guys. We got 3 returners, so it's good to get, some outside activities going just to make us closer off the court, so that when we go through tough battles on the court, it's going to be easy for us, and we understand that we got each other's back.
Right. That makes sense. Out of all your teammates, who do you think is really going to break out this season? Could be freshmen, could be one of the returning guys. Are there a couple players that you think, man, these guys are really going to make a huge impact this season?
I would say it's a couple guys. I like a couple guys new guys that we have. The biggest guy that I think that's going to stand out and is going to be talked about a lot during the season is probably Malik Ewing. Just his touch around the rim, his feel for the game, him being versatile. He's a skilled 5-man, but I don't really see him as a 5-man. I think he's the 4. Him just being able to rebound, push, do all the things on the floor, and defensively he can guard 1 through 5. Him along with Daquan Davis, our point guard, freshman point guard. His knack for the ball, he could facilitate, guard anybody he wants to guard, just by him being, hard-nosed and tough-minded. We got Christian, another freshman, 4-man. He's versatile too, can pick and pop, shoot it, put it on the floor a little bit. I think we got a lot of versatile guys that's gonna fit in right away and be able to step into some big roles and take on the battle.
And can we expect to see the Florida State approach that we've grown accustomed to, pretty much, full on defensive pressure, using a lot of guys, going like 10 deep, down the bench. Is that approach the plan still for this year?
Yeah, I think that's always gonna be the approach. I don't think Coach Hamilton's gonna get away from that approach. He likes to play 10 to 12. I mean, not 10 to 12, but at least 9 to 10 guys, being able to have that rotation, have a deep bench. That's what he's all about. And I like that about him, because it's not just about the first group. You gotta have a bench, you gotta have somebody that's coming off being a spark off the bench, when your starters can't get it rolling every night. So I love his game plan.
Yeah, I do too. And I think as a player, it's got to take a little pressure off you. I'm sure you've been in situations where you had to pace yourself during a game because you knew you're going to have to play maybe close to 40 minutes. But, here you always know that if you need a blow, you can give 100% until you need that blow, and then somebody else is going to come in and they're not going to be totally green. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, most definitely. Just knowing that you could go hard as you can, and somebody else going to replace your spot and go and match your energy. So, and give you a blow. I think we got that throughout the whole roster, but going 9 to 10 guys, I think we're going to be good, just getting after it defensively, playing as hard as we can.
Right. All right, got a couple more for you. You're the old man on the team. Do you hear about that from your teammates? Do they tease you about being the old guy?
Yeah, but I don't really take it too serious. I know it's going by fast. I've been telling them that as well. Feel like you was a freshman last year, like a couple months ago. I feel like it was my freshman year, and now we're here, in my senior year, my last year going around. But it's gonna be fun. I'm just enjoying my time with the guys. There been a couple times I've been called Unc and stuff like that.
Of all your accomplishments to date, on and off the court, what are you most proud of?
For me, I would say making it to the NCAA tournament when I was over at VCU. That's something I'm glad I got the experience, and I can't wait to get back there this year.
Right. And that was going to be my last question. What do you hope to accomplish this season as a player and as a team?
As a player, I would say just leading this group of guys to whatever we decide we want to get to, and just showing the world that I have a crazy I'm just crazy about the game, and I love it so much, and I want to show that every time I step on the floor that I'm gonna give it my all. And as a team, I just want to get back to the NCAA tournament, and hopefully we could start it off by winning the ACC championship.
Right. Jamir, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you just got done practicing weightlifting, so appreciate that. And I wish you and the team the best this season. It'd be great to see Florida State back in March Madness. And maybe when you're going through the draft process, you could come back and visit us and tell us how that's going for you.
All right, I got you back.
All right. Thank you so much, Jamir.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Our second special guest is Virginia Tech junior forward Tobi Lawal. Last year with VCU, Tobi played 19 minutes per game, averaging 8 points and 6 rebounds while shooting 67% from the floor. Welcome to the show, Tobi. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm good, thanks. Thank you for having me.
Yes, pleasure. I see you got a wool, looks like a wool cap on. Is it chilly down there in Blacksburg?
Yeah, it's cold now. So
Yes.
the weather kind of switched up on us because it was kind of warm like a couple days ago, and then it just started getting cold for no reason.
Yeah, I walked the dog last night with shorts, and I'm like, whoa, it's time to put the shorts away. So are the leaves in pink color there in the mountains?
I couldn't tell you. I think they're getting it.
So you're not a fall foliage guy?
No, I mean I like the fall more than the summer. I don't really like the heat, if I'm being honest. But my only problem with the fall is that's when everyone comes back to the campus. So I don't really like all of that noise.
Right. So you know, you're born? Were you born in London?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was born in London.
All right. So did you get home this past summer?
Yeah, I went in, I think it was July. I went for like 3 weeks.
Okay. Now
Yeah, it was just. Oh, sorry, go on. My fault.
Well, when I was just when I was waiting, I looked. I was actually going to watch some more of your highlights, and I noticed on Instat the first 3 games they list is you playing for Great Britain. So in friendlies, so you played with the national team over.
Yeah, when I went home this summer, yeah, I did.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
How was that your first time playing with them?
Yeah, that was my first ever time.
Okay.
I played with the men's team.
And how was that experience?
It was definitely a good experience because I was able to learn how older guys see the game because they've been playing the game for so many years. So they already know what play is going to happen before it happens or what's going to build up to certain things. So it's like they were trying to impart their knowledge on me so I can understand, and then it can help the game slow down. And I can say that really helped because now with Coach Young's offense, you have to be able to like take your time and understand like what type of shots are gonna come from this type of play and all this type of stuff, and you have to make different reads. So it definitely helped me understand how basketball works in general, helping my IQ. So yeah.
Right. We'll get back to that offense because I'm a big fan. But you know, I interviewed, you know, in the past, great Ozabor, who's from England, Quinn Ellis. Did Quinn play with you this summer?
No, he was doing the draft stuff,
right.
So he could play with us.
But you know those guys?
No, I know Great, because I went on a visit when he was at Montana State. And I don't really know Quinn. I don't know. I've never met him.
Okay. And so I
sorry. I met him one time. I forgot. Sorry. I just remembered. I met him one time. It was in a British All-Star game that we played. It was called Who's Fix. But it was literally like just one exchange. That's the only time I met him. Yeah.
Right. Both great young men. I'm noticing a lot of English players, you know, are popping up, you know, like I didn't even know you were from England. I just didn't. But I'm seeing a lot of guys from England, and I know that the British BBL is really picking up too. So were there any guys on that played with you this summer that I would know?
Let me say, I would say Michael Bell.
Okay.
He played with me last year at VCU.
Right.
He was like in England. I wasn't really like a big thing, so like those guys were more big than me. If I'm being honest. So
right. Okay. Cool. I just think that sooner or later that you guys are gonna, you know, make a breakthrough, and I know it's tough in the European region because there's so many good teams. But I'm hoping to see you get the national team make a breakthrough. So getting back to your game, first of all, I was really surprised. I saw in your bio on Virginia Tech's website that you last year at VCU you tested with a 49.5 vertical. That's insane.
I mean, before we did the test, I didn't know it was going to be that high. I was like, probably going to get like a 45 or something, because that's why I got lost the year before that. I got 45.
Right.
But one of my coaches actually made a joke, said, "You're going to get 50." And I was like, what's he talking about? But then I was like, all right. And then when we did it, I was like, dang, like I'm actually getting up right now. And then after, like 2 days after, when we got the results back from the combine people, they said that it was a 49.9. 0.5. And even I did a jump after that because you're only allowed 3 jumps, right? I did a jump after that and I got higher, but obviously it doesn't count because you only have 3 jumps. Yeah.
Oh, you mean you did a 4th?
Yeah. I did a 4th.
Okay, cool. So have you always been a special athlete, and was basketball always your sport, or did you play other sports?
Nah, so I only started playing basketball like when I was 16.
Okay.
So before that, I used to run track and play football, or soccer, you guys call it.
Right.
So it was actually 2 of my friends that got me into basketball, but I didn't really want to do it at the time. But they were just trying to force me to do it because I grew from like 5'9" to like 6'1", then 6'1" to like 6'3", like in a space of like, let's say 6 months. So I didn't and we couldn't really play football as much in my school anymore because they were doing work and they didn't let us go on the pitch. So it was just like, what are we gonna do?
So you just tried basketball. So what did I mean, you'd be a great goalie, but I'm sure you were smaller then. What position did you play in football?
I played right back, center back, and center mid.
Okay.
So I didn't really, yeah.
And what did you do in track? It was short distance, medium, long?
No, it was short. It was I did hurdles, I did 100-meter sprint, I did 200, and I did a relay. That's it.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll move on to your journey a little bit. I just recently interviewed a former teammate, Max Shoga, who also was from Europe. Max is my personal pick for the A10 Player of the Year, and I think VCU is going to win the A10 as well. So, having said that, it's knowing that they had a good team, I was kind of surprised that you transferred. So what were the factors that led to you transferring?
I just don't think, I didn't see eye to eye with my development there. And don't get me wrong, they're like great people, but it's just like I didn't see eye to eye with my development there and what I was going to be doing. And my coach that first recruited me, JD, is here. So that relationship was a big factor. And then when I found out that all the other coaches had great people, it kind of made it easier because I knew I was going to grow regardless on the basketball court because I know they're going to take care of me there. But then off the court, they have people like EL and other foundations like the FCA that can help me grow spiritually as well. And my faith is the most important thing to me. So both factors really made it easy.
Great. Last year, you played 38 games. VCU, had a long season, but you got no starts. So I assume that had to play somewhat of a role?
Last year, from what I was told, me not starting was part of just getting the rotations right to help them figure out stuff. So I don't really bother about that. I just wanted to play. I haven't played college basketball for real before, so that was my first opportunity to try and play, and that's what I cared about.
Okay. I don't know if it's been announced. I don't know if Coach Young has said anything, but do you know? And I know that starting doesn't really matter. It's really, minutes. But I mean, your minutes, you didn't play a lot as a freshman. You played 19 a game last year. Do you expect to be playing more like 25, 30 this year?
I mean, I hope so. I'm going to try and make sure I'm in condition to be able to play that, but that's not up to me. That's up to coach.
Right. I just thought maybe it has already been discussed. I think you will. Just looking at the depth chart, I think, you stand out, on the court because you come out of nowhere and make blocks, and of course you're always highly efficient at the rim, and of course you make a lot of dunks. So has last year, a lot of your points were around the basket. You shot 71% at the rim, which is outstanding. I think that was like 94th percentile in all the country last year. So what kind of role do you expect? Last year you're mostly a cutter, roll man. Do you think your role is going to be changing with the Hokies?
Yeah, it has to, because for us to succeed or to be a better team, I have to be able to be versatile. And like I was saying, with Coach Young's offense, as a 4-man and sometimes probably at a 5, then I have to be able to make reads and find other people when they're open, attack off the rip, and just different stuff like that. Hit a wide open shot. So this role allows me to be versatile and expand my game in ways that I wanted to. So yeah, I think I'm not just going to be a around the rim guy.
Right. And that would be the natural progression. And maybe you want to comment on this, but I think Mike Young's offense to watch is just a pleasure. The way the ball movement, the cutting, it's just, I think he's quite the genius. How would you describe the offense?
I couldn't tell you. Like, this is the first time I'm seeing a type of offense like this, to be honest. So it's like I'm still trying to get a grip on it right now. But yeah, it's really hard to guard. Like, when everything's running well and everything's clicking, like you really can't guard it, because if you leave one thing open, there's gonna be something else wide open. Like, and there's not really many offenses that have that in college basketball. Like, most offenses, you know where they're going to every single time. But Coach Young teaches us to have an act. So you might think it's one play, it's not. Like, so it's really like you have to be. It's gonna be really hard to scout this type of offense.
Right. I agree. So is there any particular skill? I know you probably didn't have a lot of time because, you go right over to Europe and you're playing games over there, but is there any particular skill you focused on since last season? Like, I want to be a better driver, I want to be a better shooter, I want to be a better on-ball defender. I mean, is there any one thing that you really said, I'm going to be better at this year?
Probably my shooting. I think this summer I've probably made like more than 15,000 shots. So
wow,
like jump shots. So yeah, it's definitely my shooting.
Okay, that's a lot more than you took last season.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing that. So, do you feel comfortable? And are we talking 3-pointers, mid-range, or both?
Just everything all together. So pull-ups, 3-pointers, mid-range, everything. Just like getting comfortable, working on my mechanics, just being able to be comfortable. Like, if I'm left wide open, like, I can knock it down. Like, that's instilling that type of confidence in me through the amount of reps I put in. So that was the main thing. Right.
And I believe I don't have the numbers memorized, but I think you shot. Did you shoot over 40% from 3 last year? I know it was a small sample.
I shot 7, made 3.
Right. And then you also shot, I think, close to 70% from the free throw line.
Yeah, I don't even remember what that was.
I think it was 67 or 68.
Yeah.
So it's close. So yeah. So that bodes well. I mean, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you take more jumpers. The team looks pretty young this season. There are a lot of new faces. Not many seniors that I'm aware of. I know you have Hassan Miller from Temple coming in, and Ben Burnham from Charleston coming in.
I'm Elijah.
Huh?
I said I'm Elijah, sorry.
Okay. But for the most part, it looks like a lot of young guys. So among your new teammates, and you could include the seniors, who has impressed you the most?
I think everyone has. The way we come to work is like, we have a good work ethic. Like, everyone comes with a mindset of playing as hard as they can. And obviously you're going to make mistakes in general, but if you can play through it and make effort plays to get back on track, then everything will be fine. So the main thing that's important is the work ethic, like how much effort you're putting into each play, each practice. And once you have that, like, with a group of guys like this, like, there's a lot of talent on this team, even though we're young. Like, everything will start to click as long as people start to understand and watch film and get better, which everyone's doing. Like, everyone's a lot of the time always in the gym, so it doesn't make it hard for us to develop as a team.
Good. The team, this is probably a phrase that you've probably heard more than once. We would say they're in a rebuilding phase, because a lot of the the key players from last year left, and now we have a lot of new players coming in, including freshmen. So what are reasonable expectations for the team? Has that been discussed, like your goals? And you know, I mean, the ACC is not a conference that is easy to win with 18 teams and teams like Duke in there. So what are reasonable expectations for the Hokies this season?
I think we're just going to take it like one game at a time. So like, you don't really want to focus too much on the future, because then that you lose sight of the present, and then it doesn't help you focus on each play, each possession. You know what I'm trying to say? Like, I think we're more locked in on what's going on right now, and everything else will sort itself out. So I think that's what's more important.
Yeah, that makes sense, and that's probably a really good approach. All right, so lastly, I'm going to ask you, you mentioned your faith, but I just wanted to get to know you a little bit better, you know, as a person. What kind of interests do you have outside of basketball? Just what kind of things how do you like to spend your time, and so forth and so on?
To be honest, I don't really do much. Like, I'm either in the gym or in my room, like taking a nap or sleeping. Like, I really nap everywhere, if I'm being honest. Or I'm on the game. Like, sometimes that's really it. I don't really do much. I'm a simple guy.
So it's basketball, eat, sleep, basketball, schoolwork. And you're a sociology major with, I think you have a minor in
international studies. Yeah.
Right. So, and how's that going?
Oh, that's cool. I should be able to graduate soon, probably like at the end of this summer coming up. So yeah. So by the end of this year and just a bit in the summer, then I'll be done.
All right. Well, congratulations.
Thank
All
you.
right. Toby, really looking forward to seeing you play this year. New team, new offense. I think you're gonna have a breakout season personally, and be one of the surprises. You know, I think you're one of those players right now that is kind of under the radar, but I think at the end of the year, people are gonna know who you are.
Thank you.
So thanks for being on the show today, and I wish you and the team the best. And please come back and visit us in the future.
Okay, thank you.
All right. It was great talking to those guys. And as always, I want to thank our listeners and our two special guests for joining us. And I want to thank Drew for going through all 18 teams with me and the ACC. If you ever miss an episode, you can get caught up at hoopsprospects.com. We'll be back later this week. We're going to be pumping out conference previews left and right. And the next conference up is the Big Ten. And we'll talk with more special guests to be announced. Haven't heard from the Big Ten yet. Come on, guys. So there we go. That's the end of the show. Drew, what do you got? Got any final thoughts?
Oh my God, we're 7 days away from college basketball being like fully officially back. Cannot wait. Like I said, I put $7. I got suckered into it. I paid my $7 to watch an exhibition game. That's how deprived I feel from college basketball. So I watched the USC Gonzaga game, was really, really entertaining. It was 96-93 in favor of the Trojans. With that being said, Musselman was coaching like it was a Sweet 16 game. Few played like 12 or 13 guys. So I super pumped. I can't wait. Like I said, I'm already spending money on games that don't mean anything. We did a one-time pay-per-view. It was a one-time pay-per-view price. The Big Ten Network was like $7. You can watch the game.
Seriously.
For what it's worth, Rich, the Big Ten refs already back in full effect. Guess how many fouls there were between the two teams in the first half? Both coaches agreed to a no foul out rule, which was nice. But guess how many fouls there were in the first half?
I don't know.
Like, I think it was 26.
Oh, jeez.
At one point, there were more fouls. The fouls per minute was higher. It was like 8 fouls in the first 7 minutes of game play, like 9 fouls.
I hope they get it out of their system now.
Because it was pretty bad. It was the second half was much more enjoyable, but that first half between officiating and I think there was a stoppage of play almost every. Well, there was just a turnover because teams are getting into rhythm or a foul. There was a stoppage of play like every 20 seconds. It was getting pretty bad. The first half
not
was
good.
bad.
That's not good.
Yeah.
We don't want to give any ammo to the college basketball haters.
Second half was great, though. Second half was awesome. It was a great game. Graham Ike finally remembered that he's Graham Ike. I will say this: Battle looked phenomenal. Battle looked great. So
yes, well, he can
Yeah.
look like a pro on any given day. All right, we'll wrap it up. We'll wrap it up, and we'll see you soon, folks.